I never thought my life could shatter in a single heartbeat. But it did. The night I uncovered the truth, it hit me with an unstoppable and brutal force. Everything I believed in, our love, our future, was destroyed in a moment of profound betrayal. The realization of her deceit echoed in my mind, overwhelming me with disbelief. I thought I knew pain, but this was a new level of anguish. And as I stand here on the brink of everything we built together, I understand one devastating truth. Love wasn't enough to save us. The pager beeped loudly at 2:47 a.m. I quickly sat up in bed, turned on the light, and swung my feet to the floor to listen to the announcement. Attention Eagle Star pilot and crew. Mason County Sheriff's Office needs help with a car accident on Highway 120, about 15 miles south of Red River Falls. Martindale Fire and Rescue are already there. One vehicle rolled over and there is one confirmed death. Martindale Fire and Rescue says getting the person out will take some time. Time of call, 2:47 a.m. I stood up, zipped up my flight suit, and slipped on my boots. Holding the handheld radio, I walked to the front door of the EMS crew apartment at Holy Family Medical Center. I paused long enough to hear the pilot and flight nurse respond. "Pilot here checking the weather," Gene Emery, our pilot, said. "Nurse here, ready?" Mara Kendrick, my nurse and partner, replied. I pressed the button on my radio. "Paramedic here." "Copy that. Crew here checking the weather," came the response. Gene stopped at the computer to check the weather. It looked safe to fly. Clear skies, good visibility, and calm winds. The moonlight was at 64%, perfect for flying at night. "Holy Family Base, Eagle Star will take the flight," Gene said. "Copy. Flight accepted. We'll inform Mason County deputies and Martindale Fire." We quickly grabbed our gear and helmets and took the express elevator down to the ground floor. Our helipad is on the east side of Holy Family Medical Center, right in front of the new emergency department. Waiting on the pad was our twin-engine Bell 429 Global Ranger Air Ambulance, shiny in silver and royal blue. Mara secured our EMS jump pack in the seat behind the pilot, who sat at the front. There was enough space for him, Mara, me, and even up to 2 patients. Mara's seat could move and turn, making it easy for her to assist a patient from different angles if needed. I secured the Zoll Propac MD cardiac monitor in its spot. We will use it to check the patient's vital signs when we pick them up. I settled into my seat, ready to help the patient once they are on board. We can load patients from the back or through the side doors of the helicopter. My main job during the flight will be to manage the airway and keep an eye on the patient's vital signs. Before closing the side door of the helicopter, I put on my flight helmet. I also adjusted my night vision goggles to make sure everything was working properly. The world around the helicopter changes to different shades of gray and black. Objects that were hard to see before now show their shapes clearly. I focus on making sure I can see utility poles, power lines, and communication towers, important things to watch for when flying at night. From his pilot seat, Gene shouts, "Clear!" and he presses the button that starts the Bell 429's strong engines. The engines begin to rev up, ready to provide enough power to fly quickly. I start to smell the fuel, but it fades as the air system kicks in. Once the engines are ready, Gene checks in with Mara and me. "Crew and mission equipment ready for takeoff?" "Ready on the left," I say. "Everything looks good. I can see up, down, and around. Belts and doors are secure." "Ready on the right," Mara replies. "All systems are good. I can see everything. Belts and doors are secure." "Pilot notes that crew and equipment are ready for takeoff," Gene says. "Holy Family Base. This is Eagle Star Helicopter November 994 Alpha Lima taking off. We have 3 people on board and 2 hours and 30 minutes of fuel. We'll be there in about 6 minutes. Eagle Star, copy that. Takeoff time is 2:52. Good luck." Gene pushes the throttle all the way up and the helicopter shakes a bit as it lifts off the ground. We smoothly rise to about 300 feet, making sure to fly high above the hospital building. "Turning left," Gene says. "Got it. Turning left," I reply, quickly looking for any obstacles in our path. "Clear to the right," Mara calls out after checking that side to make sure it's safe. We've practiced this takeoff many times since we started the helicopter service. With the Bell 429 facing south, Gene leans the control stick forward, and we begin to fly south toward the accident scene. I changed the radio to the mutual aid channel to reach the Mason County Sheriff's Department and ensure a safe landing area is ready. Mason County Sheriff, this is Eagle Star. How do you copy? I wait a few moments before hearing back. Eagle Star, this is Mason County 1721. 1721. Can you tell me if the landing zone is safe yet? 10-4 Eagle Star. The scene is just north of mile marker 99. The vehicle is off the road about 80 feet. Both directions of traffic are stopped, and there's someone watching your tail rotor. Good copy. 1721. Could you tell me if the rescue is still happening? Eagle Star. It looks like they are close to getting the person out of the car and onto a stretcher. Good to hear. 1721. We'll be there in less than 3 minutes. Roger that, Eagle Star. We're ready for your arrival. I turned my head as far as I could to see behind us, trying to look towards the front of the helicopter. Through the window, I noticed many red and blue lights flashing, showing that we were under 2 minutes from landing. Gene, our pilot, made a wide turn so we could all see the scene. He then pointed the helicopter north. We have power lines on the east side of the road, Gene, Mara warned. Understood. I see them, Gene replied. The communications towers and utility poles were big concerns for landing safely in the dark. Gene kept his focus on his instruments and, thanks to his night vision goggles, he made another smooth landing on the hard surface of Highway 120. Holy Family Base, Eagle Star has arrived, getting ready for a quick pickup. Estimated time on scene is 10 minutes. Roger, Eagle Star. The time is 2:59. I took off my helmet and goggles, placing them on my seat after unbuckling. The first thing I reached for was my stethoscope to check the patient's breathing before transporting them. Once we were in the air, it would be noisy and I wouldn't be able to hear anything. I also grabbed our jump kit, which had most of our medical supplies for emergencies. I stepped out of the helicopter and started looking for the incident commander. Many fire trucks were on the scene, lighting up the area. The vehicle, a 2-door Camaro, had veered off the road and rolled over multiple times. It was about 60 to 80 feet from the road and, impressively, landed on its wheels, though it was badly damaged. I spotted the person I was looking for, one of the Martindale volunteer firefighters, who stood out in a red helmet while the others wore yellow ones. "Hi, I'm Dalton Anderson," I shouted over the noise of the helicopter. "What information do you have?" "We have one confirmed death," he shouted back. "The driver wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was thrown from the car." "He's under that yellow tarp," he said, pointing to a spot nearly 80 feet away from the vehicle. The car was going north, returning to Red River Falls. They lost control and rolled over before hitting a large tree on the passenger side. They were likely speeding. The passenger is a woman. She has at least one broken arm and might have a serious leg injury, or so the first responders said. "I can't believe she's still alive. Oh, it looks like they've got her out now." I saw a group of firefighters and paramedics getting ready to help the patient. They had a neck brace on her, and I noticed her moving her left arm. One of the paramedics was holding her right arm steady. I hurried over to help. "Don't worry about applying a splint," I said. "As long as there's no bleeding, just place her arm by her side and secure her to the board. What else is wrong?" "She might have a serious injury to her leg, and we think there might be an injury in her lower body too," one of them replied. "Lay her down and let me check her quickly before we move her," I instructed. The young woman looked to be in her mid-20s. She had several cuts on her face, making her look worse. An oxygen mask was on her face, and I quickly checked her eyes, which didn't react well. There was no bleeding from her face or head, but a strong smell of alcohol filled the air. Most worrying was that she didn't respond when I spoke to her and seemed very shaken. Her right thigh looked larger than the left, which might mean a broken bone and bleeding inside. She reacted strongly when I pressed gently on her lower body. I could feel some movement there, which suggested another possible injury. Normally, we would use a special device to help with a leg injury, but in this case, it might make things worse. When I listened to her breathing, the left side sounded fine, but the right side was quiet, and her ribs seemed hurt. More importantly, I noticed her breathing tube was shifting, suggesting her right lung was having trouble. This meant air might be building up where it shouldn't, which could lead to more serious issues. Also, her belly felt hard and I couldn't hear any sounds from it, which might mean there were problems inside. I quickly reached into my flight suit and pulled out supplies for an IV. I made sure to stop any bleeding and found a good spot in her left arm to start the IV. I gently placed a catheter inside the vein and made sure it was secure. I flushed it with saline to check it was working and closed it off carefully. The whole process took about 90 seconds, and then I called for the helicopter to come right away. We usually didn't wait to start an IV, but I thought it was very important to do it quickly because she showed signs of distress. The lower her blood pressure went, the harder it became to help her. The EMTs and firefighters carefully lifted the stretcher with the patient and moved toward the waiting Bell 429 helicopter. Mara had the back doors open. I made sure to lock eyes with the pilot, who signaled for us to move to the loading area. It was very important that no one got too close to the back of the helicopter without the pilot knowing. We secured the stretcher and placed the patient in front of my seat. I thanked the EMTs and firefighters for their great work. One of them handed me a paper with information about the patient and then stepped back. I put my helmet back on and fastened my seatbelt while Mara got ready beside the patient. She quickly wrapped a blood pressure cuff around the patient's arm and attached a probe to check her pulse. Then, she switched her oxygen mask to connect to our aircraft system. "What do we have, Dalton?" Mara asked through the intercom. "Right arm, right thigh, and right leg are broken. We can't support the right leg. There might be a hip injury, too. We need to secure her with a sheet. She has a serious lung issue on the right side. Her stomach feels hard and sensitive, with no sounds from her intestines," I replied. "All right, I see what's happening. Let's get ready to relieve the pressure. We'll focus on stabilizing her hip and keep an eye on her blood pressure after we start giving her fluids. We should also get ready to give her tranexamic acid. Jean, we can take off, but I'll need to unbuckle when we're in the air, okay?" "Copy that," Jean replied. It was very important for Jean to know what was happening in the back, especially if we needed to move around. This could affect how the helicopter flew. Once we had a patient on board, our call sign changed from Eagle Star to Lifeguard. This lets other aircraft know to give us priority. We also worked under the control of Hector International Airport in Fargo to keep our airspace clear. "Contact, Hector International. This is Lifeguard Helicopter November 994 Alpha Lima. We are leaving the scene, heading to the Holy Family pad at 35.5 degrees, speed 120 knots. There are 4 people on board and about 2 hours and 10 minutes of fuel. Estimated time of arrival is 8 minutes. Lifeguard November 994 Alpha Lima, Hector International. I copy your message. I see you on radar. Keep your current speed and direction. You're clear for priority landing at the Holy Family pad. Copy your ETA of 8 minutes. In the back, I looked closely at the patient's condition and noticed her skin felt very thin. Small air bubbles were forming just under her skin, which showed that her lung was not working well. I quickly cleaned the area and got ready to place a large IV needle. I carefully punctured the area around the lung, and a rush of air came out, relieving some pressure. This was just a temporary fix until a chest tube could be inserted, but it helped right away. Mara took an extra bed sheet and carefully slid it under the patient. Together, we used the sheet to help stabilize her. After we dealt with the lung issue and applied a makeshift support, the patient became more aware. I saw that she was trying to communicate with me through her oxygen mask and the sounds of the helicopter. I shouted, "My name is Dalton. I'm a paramedic. You were in an accident. We're taking you to Holy Family Medical Center in Red River Falls. You're hurt, but we'll take good care of you. Do you understand?" She nodded as best as she could, even with the collar around her neck. I let Jean know I would switch to another radio channel and immediately did so to contact the hospital's emergency department. I checked the monitor to look at the patient's vital signs and was worried to see that her blood pressure was low at 70/45. "Holy Family ER, this is Eagle Star. Come online for a trauma report." Katie Stevens, the charge nurse, answered. "Eagle Star, this is Holy Family. Go ahead." "Holy Family. We have a roughly 25-year-old female patient who was in a serious single-vehicle accident. Please be aware that there was a fatality in the same vehicle." I kept my voice calm so the patient wouldn't feel anxious. "The patient has clear fractures in her right arm, right leg, and there's a good chance of a pelvic fracture. Her abdomen is hard, and we can't hear bowel sounds. She had a lung issue that was treated with a needle. Her oxygen levels were initially low but have improved thanks to high-flow oxygen. We also have a large IV running fluids. Her blood pressure is 70/45, pulse is 138, breathing is 24, and temperature is normal. The heart monitor shows a fast heartbeat with some irregular beats. The patient is secured on a backboard with a neck collar. It took us over 20 minutes to get her out. We should arrive in about 2 minutes. Requesting trauma alert and staff to assist us when we land. How copy, Holy Family? Good copy, Katie said. We've been keeping track of the scene and a trauma alert is in place. Trauma and brain surgeons will be there in less than 5 minutes. Staff will be ready on the landing pad for your arrival. Good copy. Eagle Star out. Jean turned the helicopter in a large circle and Mara and I put on our night vision goggles again. Is the crew and equipment ready for landing? Jean asked. Ready on the left, I said. Belts, doors, and switches are secure. Ready on the right, Mara confirmed. Belts, doors, and switches are secure. Got it. Crew and equipment ready for landing. Jean turned on the landing lights of the helicopter, lighting up the pad below. We saw a stretcher and 4 crew members waiting to help us. Jean landed perfectly, bringing the helicopter down softly on the pad. Holy Family Base! Eagle Star is back on the pad. Time now. Understood, Eagle Star. Time is 3:17. Welcome home. Mara quickly unbuckled and opened the back doors. The crew with the stretcher looked at Jean and hurried over to us. All 4 wore protective gear, including gloves and masks, to stay safe. We pushed the stretcher towards the back of the helicopter. I took the monitor and IV bags and stepped out as the patient was placed on the stretcher and taken into the emergency department, while the helicopter kept running before shutting down. We entered the main trauma room where 2 emergency doctors and nearly 20 other staff were waiting for us. Several units of blood had been brought from the lab and were ready for the patient immediately. Portable X-ray machines were outside the emergency department, and CT technicians were ready in their room for more detailed scans. A few minutes later, Dr. Marcelino, a trauma surgeon, and Dr. Chandraskata, a neurosurgeon, came in to help with the situation. A respiratory therapist and an anesthesiologist on call also joined, and a gastroenterologist was expected soon. Within 5 minutes, we had placed a large IV and the patient was receiving blood. The first X-ray images confirmed the fractures we had seen earlier. Shortly after, the CT scan showed a collapsed lung and fluid in the patient's lower body. Luckily, the CT of her head and neck showed no signs of serious injury. A team of surgical staff, including techs and nurses, prepared an operating room for emergency surgery. Within 20 minutes of landing, the patient was sedated, and tubes were placed for her breathing and chest, and she was quickly taken to the surgery room. Mara and I stood there as the last member of the trauma team left the room. What had once been a loud and busy place was now quiet and almost spooky. The trauma room was a complete mess, and it would take the cleaning staff a long time to tidy up, along with the nurses and emergency staff who needed to restock supplies. Mara and I collected our tools and put back everything we had used during the call and the flight back. The excitement I had felt just moments before was fading fast, replaced by a deep tiredness. Jean had returned to the crew dorm before us. He took care of plugging in the helicopter's battery charger and refilled its fuel. With the supplies ready, Eagle Star was back in action. Since we had gone on a trauma call, I needed to write the patient care report. Most of our calls are for moving patients from one hospital to another, where Mara leads the care. But in emergencies, paramedics usually take a more active role because of their hands-on experience. Still, Mara Kendrick, as the flight nurse, held the main responsibility for the patient. She had confidence in my abilities to provide good care. It also helped that I worked with her husband, Josh, at the Red River Falls Fire Department. I typically worked a few shifts a month for Eagle Star, usually 12-hour shifts, while the full-time medics had longer shifts. I finally completed the report around 4:30 a.m. and decided to grab a little sleep before heading home to Royal Fork, which is about 45 minutes west of Red River Falls. Our shifts on the helicopter start and end at 7 a.m., so I took the chance to rest. I planned to let Mara look over my report before she left for home, just in case she wanted to add anything I might have missed. Overall, I felt the call had gone well. We had been on site for only 10 minutes and managed to provide good care both at the scene and during our flight back to Holy Family. The first responders and firefighters from Martindale did a great job getting the patient out safely, while the local deputies and state troopers set up the landing area effectively. I couldn't see much room for improvement, although there are always ways to make our response better. However, Sometimes, even when everything seems fine, bad things can still happen. This time, it was one of those situations. Stephanie Pinkerton and her boyfriend, Ziggy Alexopoulos, had been out with friends at the only bar in Martindale and decided to head home afterward. Both of them had been drinking, and Ziggy, having had too much, was not fit to drive. Still, he wanted to impress Stephanie and pushed his car to go faster, ultimately losing control. A report later showed that Ziggy's blood alcohol level was 0, 25, which was well over the legal limit. Less than 20 minutes after she went into emergency surgery, Stephanie Pinkerton sadly passed away. She was just a month away from turning 26 and left behind a 6-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. I live in Royal Fork, about 45 miles west of Red River Falls, where I worked. I couldn't stop thinking about the call I received, wondering if there was something I could have done differently that might have changed what happened. Deep down, I knew there was not much that could have made a difference, especially given the extent of Stephanie's injuries. However, emotionally, I always found myself searching for reasons why someone dies instead of surviving a terrible event. This is how many firefighters, paramedics, police officers, doctors, and nurses often feel. We want to believe there was at least one thing we could have done to help. I suppose it's a way we check ourselves internally. I drove into my driveway, which had a mid-1970s split-level home with a 2-car garage. I parked my 2014 Taurus on one side, leaving the other side for my partner, Darla Jones. Darla had moved in with me about 4 months ago, bringing along her 5-year-old daughter, Natalie, and her 3-year-old son, Nathan. Darla's divorce from her husband of 7 years, Randy, would be finalized in just over a month. Most of my friends advised me to be careful about dating someone who was separated and not yet divorced, especially my best friend, Danny Larson. Danny was especially worried because he had known Darla and Randy before I did. They had been together since high school and had a difficult relationship, often breaking up and getting back together. Several other guys were interested in Darla and would have likely treated her better than Randy, but none could change the connection she had with him. I met Darla through mutual friends at a local bar called The Half Pint. I was immediately attracted to her. She had a natural charm and dark features, with beautiful brown eyes that caught my attention. Though she was small, she carried herself with a confidence that was hard to miss. She was short, but she had a lot of charm and beauty. We took our time getting to know each other, especially since she was going through a divorce. Somehow, I managed to win her over, and we started dating only each other. About 3 months into our relationship, we decided to move her and the kids out of her parents' house and into mine. I had 3 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms, which made perfect sense. I really liked Natalie and Nathan and started bonding with them right from the start. I hadn't met Randy Jones. Just before Darla filed for divorce because of his ongoing issues, he had left for a job in one of the new oil fields in North Dakota. He was working as some kind of laborer for an oil company. Darla hadn't heard from him while we had been together. The divorce was mostly straightforward, and Randy's lawyer agreed to the terms. This meant Darla could keep the furniture and what little was in the checking account. The judge set a temporary custody arrangement, and Randy was told to pay a small amount of child support each month based on his last known job. I walked into the house from the garage and went upstairs to the kitchen, placing my overnight bag and keys on the table. Almost right away, I noticed something. It was faint, but there was a hint of cigarette smoke. I walked around the upper floor, checking the kids' bedrooms and finally the master bedroom, looking for the source of the smell. Everything seemed normal in each room, but I could still smell smoke. Someone had been smoking in my house. I stepped out onto the deck to look for cigarette butts. At first, I didn't see anything, but I decided to check more closely. I walked down the stairs to the bottom of the deck and looked underneath it. There on the ground were 4 cigarette butts, Marlboro Lights. I knew Darla didn't smoke, and I hadn't had anyone else over, like a repairman or delivery person. Given the smoke smell inside, I could only guess that someone had smoked on the deck and then come inside. Right now, I was the only one home. Nathan was at daycare, and Natalie was at preschool and then daycare with him. Darla was at her job at Callahan Manufacturing, the biggest factory in Royal Fork and one of the largest employers. She worked from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Callahan's made all sorts of trailers, flatbed semi-trailers, cattle and horse trailers, car haulers, and smaller utility and landscaping trailers. I couldn't think of anyone that Darla might have had over. None of her family smoked, and none of her friends did, at least not that I knew of. I decided to clear my mind and take a shower to wash away the tiredness from my long shift. After the shower, I felt much better and chose to work on a few projects around the house while waiting for everyone to come back. Darla and the kids came home soon after 4:15 that afternoon. Darla looked worn out, but the kids were full of energy. Natalie and Nathan ran up to me and gave me big hugs. I was starting to really enjoy having them in my life and couldn't imagine it without them and their mom. Darla seemed very tired from her workday. It might surprise you, but she works as a welder on one of the main assembly lines. I started making dinner, which was just a basic macaroni and cheese with chicken and some Jell-O that the kids loved. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. I really liked sitting at the table with Darla and the kids. After dinner, Darla helped me clear the table while I washed the dishes. She had been suggesting I get a dishwasher ever since she moved in, but I hadn't felt it necessary yet. When I lived alone, I didn't use that many dishes. "So, how was work today?" I asked. "Oh, pretty normal," Darla replied, drying the casserole dish. "They're thinking about hiring more people, so we might get to reduce some of the overtime." "That would be nice. Maybe we can all take a weekend trip together soon." "Well," she said hesitantly, "probably not until summer break in a few weeks." "Yeah, I guess," I said. "By the way, did anyone come by while I was gone yesterday?" Darla didn't look at me and kept drying a plate. "No, not that I recall. Why do you want to know?" "Just wondering. I thought I caught a whiff of smoke when I got home this morning. Only my dad smokes in my family, and he didn't visit yesterday." "I know," I replied thoughtfully. "Besides, your dad smokes a certain brand." "What does that have to do with anything?" she asked, still not meeting my gaze. "Oh, nothing much. I just saw a few cigarette butts under the deck." I noticed Darla took a deep breath. It seemed like she was holding back something. "I'm not sure," she said. "It was probably just one of the utility workers. They checked the meters under the deck." I understood her relief with that answer. Maybe," I answered, "but those workers usually stick to their schedules. I doubt they'd take a break under my deck, maybe one, but probably not more than that." Darla quickly put away the towel she was using. "I'm going to start getting the kids ready for their baths," she said as she walked toward their rooms. "Isn't it a bit early for baths?" "Yeah," she replied. "But they stayed up late last night, and I want them to sleep a bit earlier tonight. Plus, they really don't like baths." I knew that well. She usually waited until right before bed, around 8:30, to give them baths so they could be in bed by 9. It was clear she was avoiding me. Darla took care of the kids' baths, and we spent the evening relaxed in front of the TV, watching a few kids' shows on Netflix. Darla didn't say much to me before we went to sleep and seemed very focused on the children. I felt like she was purposely ignoring me. We both stayed up to watch the news, but with the tension in the room, I hardly remembered anything. I climbed into bed first and waited for Darla. When she came to bed, she wore a simple nightshirt. I always thought she looked great in anything. She got into bed, gave me a quick wave for good night, and turned away from me. I moved closer and tried to hold her, hoping for some closeness. Darla took my hand gently and wrapped my arm around her. "Sorry, honey, it's been a long day and I'm really tired," she said. "That's okay," I responded, feeling a bit disappointed. "I understand." But the truth was, I didn't really understand. In all the time we had been together, it was the first time she had turned me down for affection. We didn't always connect every night, but this was different. I lay there holding her, but knew we both had trouble falling asleep. Something was definitely off. I noticed the cigarettes were a big sign. I got up early the next morning, got ready for work, and kissed Darla on the forehead around 5:45. I jumped in my car and drove to Red River Falls. She barely moved when I kissed her, and I could tell she was pretending to be asleep. I arrived at the fire station a bit after 6:30 and prepared for my shift. My official job is firefighter, but I work as a senior paramedic on one of our 3 ambulances. While we cover the city of Red River Falls, we also handle most of the ambulance calls for Mason County. Many of the smaller towns in Mason County, like Martindale, have fire departments with a few members trained as first responders. These responders usually get to the scene of a medical emergency first, while an ambulance is on its way from Red River Falls. Some larger towns, such as Royal Fork, have their own volunteer ambulance services. In fact, 6 members of the Red River Falls Fire Department live in Royal Fork. Unlike many departments in the country, we don't have to live in the city we work in. Since we provide emergency medical services for most of Mason County, we can live anywhere within its limits. I chose Royal Fork because it was more than just a wide spot on the road. It was an actual town with shops, gas stations, and a grocery store. In contrast, folks in Martindale, which has a population of 300, had to drive more than 15 miles just to pick up a gallon of milk. Royal Fork had around 4,500 residents and a lively main street with many local businesses. The school district was based there and even gained a few students this past year. I was happy to find a nice house in Royal Fork, paying about $100,000 for my split-level home. In Red River Falls, the same house would have cost me an extra $20,000 or $30,000. I work 24 hours on and 48 hours off at the fire department. The job is not very demanding, and I get a good amount of paid time off because of how many hours I work each year. It took some time for Darla and the kids to get used to my schedule. I think Darla was worried that I might not come home. She was used to that feeling, especially since Randy would sometimes disappear for days and then come back, asking for forgiveness. I never understood why Darla didn't leave him for good. Their home was often filled with arguments. What began as loud disagreements often turned into yelling that could shatter dishes. Finally, Darla had enough and moved out, taking the kids to stay with her parents. Randy vanished to North Dakota, where he reportedly got a job at one of the oil reserves. On my 24-hour shift, things were steady but not too busy. It was a typical Thursday in spring. We only had 12 EMS calls and no fire emergencies. I got home Friday morning a little after 8 and started my usual routine. However, I once again caught a slight scent of cigarettes, but I didn't find anything out of place in the bedrooms or downstairs. I stepped out onto the back deck and looked through the spaces in the boards below. I couldn't see any cigarette butts on the ground beneath the deck. Just as I was about to head back inside, a feeling made me check more closely. I went down the steps and looked underneath the deck. What I was looking for caught my eye right away. The ground was damp from not getting much sunlight and from melting frost. I could see my footprints from 2 days ago when I first noticed the cigarette butts. But today, I spotted a fresh set of footprints that definitely weren't mine. They were too small for me and too large to be Darla's or the kids'. Someone had been on my back deck, but this time they had cleaned up after themselves. I went back inside the house feeling quite upset. Clearly, someone had been there without my permission. Darla and I always locked the house when we left, which meant that whoever came by had some way of getting in. I decided to take a shower as I thought about my worries. Who could be visiting while I was away? And why hadn't Darla said anything? Just then, I heard the doorbell ring. I quickly jumped out of the shower, grabbed a towel, and wrapped a bathrobe around me. As I left the bathroom, I heard the front door open. Someone had come in. "Hello? Dalton? It's me, Danny." It was my best friend and the local sheriff's deputy, Danny Larson. "Yeah, I'm up here," I called back. "I just got out of the shower." "Oh, sorry to drop by unannounced," he said a bit sheepishly. "No problem. Just give me a moment to get dressed, and I'll be right out." Danny waited in the living room while I finished drying off and getting ready. Once I was dressed, I headed to the living room. I found Danny sitting in one of my recliners, sipping a Coke he had taken from the fridge. "What's up, bro?" I asked. "Not much, man. I just wanted to talk to you about something important," Danny replied. "Sounds serious," I noted, hearing the tone in his voice. "It is, and I'm worried you might not like what I have to say." I felt a twist in my stomach. "Go on, Danny." "Well, Dalton, this is tough for me to share, but someone has been coming by your house when you're at work. My route covers Royal Fork, and I patrol the area during my shifts. A few weeks ago, I noticed an old Chevy pickup in your driveway. I've seen it several times since then. You drive a Taurus, and Darla drives an Escape, so I know it isn't your vehicle." "Did you check the license plate?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "I probably shouldn't have done that since I could get in trouble," he said slowly. "But yeah," he went on, "I looked it up. It's registered to Darla's ex." I felt a lump in my throat but kept a calm face. "Okay," I replied. Danny looked puzzled. "Okay? Is that it?" "I don't know. What more do you want me to say?" I thought you'd react more strongly, Dalton. Unless, he said carefully, you already knew. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a Coke for myself before heading back to the living room. I sat down on the sofa across from Danny. I didn't know it was Randy Jones, but the last few days I had a feeling something was off. I finished a long shift at work a few days ago, and when I got home the next morning, I thought I smelled smoke in the house. I checked everywhere, but nothing seemed out of place. But when I stepped outside onto the deck, I noticed some cigarette butts lying on the ground. Are you sure it wasn't the water or electric meter person? Danny asked. I don't think so, I replied. I don't know if either of them smokes, but if they do, I can't see them hanging around under my deck, especially not with 4 butts left behind. Okay, I get it, Danny said. Anyway, I had a day off and then worked my usual shift at the fire department yesterday. When I got home this morning, I smelled smoke again. I stepped outside, looked under the deck, and saw footprints. I think someone was smoking up top and then went underneath to tidy up. That's strange. How would they know? Because, I explained, I might have mentioned it to Darla the other night after she got home from work. She suggested a few different possibilities about who it could be, but none of them made much sense. After we went to bed, she seemed distant and didn't respond much. We stayed quiet for a moment. What do you think you'll do? Danny asked. I'm going to find out what's going on. If Randy is trying to get back in touch with Darla, it has to stop right away. Do you think he just wants to see the kids? He wondered. Maybe, I said. But why now, after all this time? In all the time Darla and I have been together, he hasn't asked to see the kids once. I see what you mean, Danny replied. So what's your plan? I'll do what I must, Danny. I'm going to talk to her tonight and let her know what you told me. Once she hears I know about Randy stopping by, she'll have to be honest with me. Danny shook his head with sympathy. I really feel for you, Dalton. And even with everything I've said, I like Darla and hoped you two would make it. I appreciate that, Danny. And I know you're not the type to say, I told you so. Thank you for that. Danny finished his drink, got up, and we shook hands firmly. I'm really sorry, Dalton. I hope this is nothing serious. I know, man. Thanks for stopping by and letting me know. I watched Danny drive off, feeling nervous about my upcoming talk with Darla. I ran a few errands in town and picked up a new garden hose at Delmar's Hardware. By the time I got home, it was late afternoon, and Darla and the kids would be back soon. I cooked some burgers and made spaghetti for dinner, which Darla and the kids enjoyed. Natalie and Nathan eagerly finished their meals, and I couldn't help but smile as I watched little Nathan slurp up his noodles. Darla offered to help clean up afterward, but I gently said, Don't worry about it. I've got this. Just relax a bit with the kids. I'll come find you in a little while and we can talk. Darla hesitated. What do you want to discuss? We'll get to that, I answered, washing a pan. Just go spend some time with the kids. I'll be done in about 20 minutes. She hesitated, but eventually left the kitchen. I found her in the family room watching the kids play video games. I stood there for a bit, watching them. Darla had Nathan on her lap, while Natalie focused on the screen. Finally, I said, Want to come upstairs and talk for a moment? Darla seemed unsure, but placed Nathan on the couch. Be good now, okay? Mommy and Dalton are going to talk. Both Natalie and Nathan were too involved in their game to notice. Darla followed me upstairs to the kitchen where we could talk quietly. I had made some coffee even though it was late, but since it was Saturday, we didn't have to worry about work the next day. I looked at her for a moment, feeling nervous but ready. There was no easy way to start this. I want to know who has been visiting while I'm at work, I said. Her pause told me something. What do you mean, Dalton? She asked. Please just be honest. I want us to have a real talk, and it needs both of us to be honest. I noticed the smell of smoke when I got home and saw footprints outside. I'm surprised to see that on my deck again, I remarked, looking at her. Dalton, I wouldn't invite anyone over while you're gone, she said, sounding defensive. Then who has been around while I'm away? I pressed. Why are you asking me this? What do you think I'm hiding? She shifted in her seat, looking uneasy. Because it feels like you're dodging my question. Because it feels like you don't trust me. I don't smoke, Dalton. I don't know whose cigarettes those are. You're starting to sound like my ex-husband. I moved closer, speaking softly. It's interesting you mention your ex-husband. Why is that interesting? She asked, puzzled. It's interesting because my friend Danny was by this morning while you were at work. He patrols around here and saw a tan Chevy pickup in my driveway several times. It only shows up when I'm at work. Darla's face went pale, her hands clenched into fists. Also, I continued, I know who owns that truck. Do you know who it is? Darla looked down, tears starting to form. Yeah, I thought you might. I need to know how long you've been seeing Randy. Darla stood up, grabbing a tissue from the counter, trying to pull herself together. It started about 3 weeks ago, she admitted, her voice shaky. He came back to town, found my parents, and asked about me. My dad wouldn't say where we were, but gave him my number. The first few times he called when I was at work, but then he followed me home. He just wanted to talk. She took a breath and wiped her eyes. Randy told me he found a job up north with an oil company and that he's been working on his drinking. He's been sober for almost 5 months now. I wasn't sure if this change was real at first, but he seems different now. He was great with the kids, brought them gifts, and took them to the park. Dalton listened carefully. So what happens next? He asked kindly. Does Randy want to see Natalie and Nathan? Is that why he's back? That's part of it, Dalton, she said, tears in her voice. But he also wants me to give him another chance. Randy says he still loves me and has finally figured out how to be happy without drinking. He wants me and the kids to move back in with him and be a family again. The kids were so happy to see him and felt a real bond with their dad. He's finally the man they always needed him to be. I started to feel uneasy. So, what's going to happen? You can't be thinking about going back to him, right? What about me? What about the time we've spent together? I'm really confused right now, Dalton. I shook my head in disbelief. Are you thinking of leaving me, Darla? I don't know, she sobbed. I'm not sure what to think. This wasn't supposed to happen. I shouldn't be feeling this way about Randy. I hesitated, but needed to know. Darla, have you seen Randy since he came back to talk to you? Oh, Dalton, I'm so sorry. I slammed my hands down on the table and got up, walking to my bedroom feeling overwhelmed. Darla followed me and tried to comfort me, but I couldn't stand her touch. Dalton, please, just try to understand. Randy should have done this before I filed for divorce. I wanted to move on, I really did. And I wanted it to be with you. When? I asked. When what? When did you see Randy? Did you do that here? Did you disrespect me in my own home, Darla? She gasped. No. I promised, Dalton. I would never do that. I'm so sorry it happened at all. I never meant for it to happen. It was just some old feelings that came back. Randy and I always had a rocky relationship. It felt like we were close again when I was at his mom's house last weekend, and I didn't know how to handle it. I'm so sorry, Dalton. So that was it? Just once with him? Yes, she admitted, but it was different. For the first time in a long time, he was really caring. It felt like we were truly connecting again. I don't know how else to describe it. I struggled to hold back tears. So is that what you want? Another chance with Randy? You're ready to throw away the last 7 months we've had together to go back to him? After everything that happened before? I don't know, Dalton. I haven't made up my mind yet. He's still the father of my kids, and he seems so different now. People change when they're not dealing with alcohol, Darla. What do you think will happen if he goes back to his old ways? He promised he wouldn't. He said he would stay sober for me and the kids if we came back. I let out a surprised laugh. Darla's face turned to frustration. What's so funny, Dalton? Laughing at me isn't going to help me decide if I want to be with you instead of Randy. That was it for me. You know what, Darla? It sounds like you've already made your choice. I started to put some clothes into my bag. What are you doing, Dalton? What does it look like? I'm packing. I'm going to call Danny and see if I can stay at his place tonight so I won't bother you while you figure things out. Darla's expression changed as she realized what this meant. Dalton, please, let's talk about this some more, okay? What else is there to say? I asked, putting more pants in my bag. It's clear the connection I thought we had isn't strong enough to keep you from thinking about going back to Randy. I never said I was leaving for sure, Dalton. No, but that doesn't change what you've done. And don't forget why Randy is your ex in the first place. I told you, Dalton. Randy isn't like that anymore. Well, once you are out, you can see for yourself. People usually don't change who they really are. I grabbed my keys and went downstairs, feeling heavy with what was happening. I paused by the family room where Natalie and Nathan were playing. It hit me hard. I wasn't just ending it with Darla, but also stepping away from the kids I had come to care about. I turned to leave as it became too much to bear. "Dalton, please," Darla said, following me. "Let's just talk more about this, okay?" "Like I said, Darla, there's nothing more to say. You clearly don't care enough to stay faithful. And it seems you still have feelings for Randy. This situation isn't right. You've had 7 months to think it over, and it's clear you still haven't made a decision. My friends and family were right. I shouldn't have gotten involved with someone still tied to a past relationship. I won't make that mistake again." I tossed my bag into the passenger seat and got in. "Dalton, please, I'm asking you. Come back inside so we can talk about this more." I held the steering wheel tightly and took a few breaths. "I'm going to Danny's for the night. I'm too upset to talk about this clearly. My advice to you is to take this time and figure out what you really want. I'll be back home tomorrow at noon. If you still want to be with me, we can talk then. If you decide to give Randy another chance, I hope you will have moved on by the time I return." Darla stood in the garage, clearly upset as I drove away. I started to question my decision. Was I making a mistake? Was I pushing Darla away without meaning to? Or was I just being difficult? Maybe it was all those things. Maybe it was none. I just knew I needed some space to think. I called my friend Danny on his cell. He was still working and wouldn't be done until 11. He said I could stay at his place and let myself in. Danny didn't ask too many questions. I just told him that I had talked to Darla and things had gone badly. We both had keys to each other's homes, so that was fine. Danny lived in a nice ranch house in Royal Fork with 3 bedrooms. I let myself in and took the spare bedroom while he used another room for his home office. His finished basement had a big space for watching TV that also had a pool table and another area set up for his model train setup. At first, I thought it was a bit silly for a man in his 30s to be into model trains. However, as Danny shared more about his hobby, I found it interesting. I often spent hours at his home, watching him create details for the landscapes, trees, and little buildings. It was almost as calming as watching a flame flicker. Maybe it was his way of escaping, a small world where worries seemed to disappear. As I looked at his setup, I wished it was a real place I could go to escape my problems with Darla. Danny got home around 11:15 p.m. We stayed up talking until nearly 3 in the morning as I shared my feelings. We had a few drinks and I let my emotions flow. Danny kept the drinks coming and listened closely, asking gentle questions to help me think, but he never judged me. He had never fully supported my relationship with Darla, mainly because she hadn't finished her divorce from Randy yet. I struggled to make sense of everything. What did Randy have that I didn't? For the first time, I could offer Darla and the kids a safe and caring home. They never had to worry if they would have food to eat, clothes to wear, or whether the lights would stay on. Randy had never kept a steady job for more than 6 months at a time. He dropped out of high school and didn't get a jet. He couldn't understand what drew Darla to him in the first place, let alone why she married him. They didn't have their daughter, Natalie, until they had been married for almost 2 years. Randy didn't want Darla to work, make friends, or even go to church with her family. He kept her away from the world, not letting her see what was really happening. So why would Darla go back to him? Was it simply because he was finally clean? How long would that last? Was his change just a way to take control of her and the kids again? Was this the kind of life and love she had with Randy? It all confused me more the deeper I thought about it. Eventually, I fell asleep on the spare bed around 3 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, it was already 11:20. I hurriedly got dressed, grabbed my things, and went to Danny's front door. Danny had been up for a while and was sitting on his sofa reading the local newspaper. "Where are you going, man?" he asked. "I need to get home. I want to talk to Darla one last time before she leaves, just to make sure," I said. Danny looked at me with a mix of compassion and worry. "Okay, good luck. Let me know if you need anything," he replied. "I will," I said as I walked to my car. Suddenly I realized I should have stayed to talk to Darla. I loved her and the kids, and I didn't want to miss the chance to discuss everything. When I turned onto the street in front of my house, my stomach dropped. There was Randy's old Chevy in my driveway, along with another car that I guessed belonged to his mother. Darla, Randy, and his mother were all putting their things into the back of Randy's truck. I parked my car and watched for a few minutes until Darla finally saw me. They all stopped what they were doing and just stared at me for a moment. Finally, Randy's mother said, "Can we have a few minutes?" Randy set down a box and Darla came over to me. We were far enough away from everyone that we could talk quietly. "Dalton, she started. "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't go. Stay for a while and let's talk, okay? Dalton, we're almost done here. Who cares? It's just things. The only things that matter to me are you and the kids. I have to believe there was a reason you left Randy. You're here with me for a reason. Please don't make a mistake by going back to him." "I'm not running, Dalton. You were right last night. I still have feelings for him. And it's not fair to you to be with you while my heart is still with him." I stood there, my head down, tears falling down my face. "There was a reason you left Randy, Darla. You know it and I know it. After everything you went through with him, can you really say you would be happier with him than with me? I've tried to give you a safe place here, a good car, clothes, beds, and toys for the kids. You never have to worry about where your next meal will come from. Do you really think Randy can provide all of that? Do you want to go back to living in a cramped apartment again? A home is more than just a building, Dalton. Life is more than just things." "I understand that, Darla, but you still need a good place to live, clothes, and food. You have been really wonderful to us, Dalton, while we were here. I'm sorry." I looked away, feeling frustrated. I didn't want Randy to see me cry, but it was getting harder to hold back my feelings. Why couldn't you just tell me the truth from the start? Why not be open about how you feel? "I don't know, Dalton," Darla replied, looking tired. "Part of it is because Randy and I are still married. It felt complicated. What about the kids? Do you really think Randy will become a better father? I can't promise anything, Dalton, but he seems to really want to change. He seems more like the man I always wanted him to be." I didn't know what else to say. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore, and neither could she. "Please stay," I whispered, reaching out to her. "I believe this is where you belong." "I belong with my family, Dalton," she cried. "Is it because of how I acted last night? If it is, I'm truly sorry. But can't you and the kids stay so we can talk this through? There's nothing left to discuss. I'm so sorry, Dalton." She pulled away and headed back to Randy's truck. Randy looked unsure but slightly amused. "Darla, wait a moment," I called out. She and Randy stood by his truck. The kids were already in another car I thought belonged to Randy's mother, Beulah. I went inside and hurriedly packed away the Nintendo game system, putting everything into a box we kept by the TV. It only took a couple of minutes. When I came back to the front door, Randy was waiting there, and I felt I needed to confront him. "Here," I said, handing him the box. "Take these for the kids." Randy looked at the box. "Awesome! This will be fun! Hey, kids!" he called as he walked back to his truck. "Look what I have for you!" It hurt to hear Natalie and Nathan squeal and laugh with joy when they saw their games were coming along. Darla quickly helped the kids into the back of Beulah's car and then shot me one last look before getting into Randy's truck. "Darla?" She stepped back out for a moment. I tossed her the keys to the Escape. "You should take the car. I'll call the bank on Monday and have my name removed from the loan." She didn't say anything, just walked to the garage and backed her car out. Before she reached the road, I stopped her. She rolled down the window as I got closer. "Darla, I need to tell you something. If you leave today, it's final. I deserve more than being a second choice." Darla didn't know how to respond, only saying, "I'm really sorry, Dalton." Then she drove away and I could see tears on her face. I couldn't understand how she could be so sad and yet cause so much hurt. It might have been easier if she had reacted in a different way. I stood at the front of my house, watching them drive away until they turned left at the end of the street. I moved slowly back up the stairs to my living room. The silence felt heavy in a house that used to be lively and full of noise. I picked up my phone and called Danny. A moment later, he picked up. "Hey, it's me," I said. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked. "They just left with Randy a couple of minutes ago." There was a pause. "Oh, Dalton, I'm really sorry to hear that. I don't have to work today," he added. "I'll come over in a few minutes, okay?" "Sure, see you soon," I replied flatly. True to his word, Danny arrived about 10 minutes later. We spent the day trying to cheer each other up after my breakup. Danny didn't have work that day, and I decided to take a day off myself the following morning after all the drinks we were having. That night, Danny stayed at my place, and we spent a lot of the next day together. He didn't give me much advice. He just listened as I shared everything I needed to say. The hardest part, besides sleeping alone at night, was walking past Natalie and Nathan's empty rooms. I had grown very close to them. At just over 31 years old, I still had time to start my own family, but it felt like I lost more than just a girlfriend. It seemed like I had lost 3 people, and that made it hurt much more than a regular breakup. Over the next few weeks, I tried to move forward and found distractions wherever I could. I made an effort to avoid people who might mention Darla and the kids, so I took some time off my schedule to keep my distance. A lot of folks from the Red River Falls Fire Department lived in Royal Fork, and many of us also worked with the Royal Fork Volunteer Fire and Rescue Department. Some of Darla's friends were volunteers who worked with me on the ambulance service. After about 3 weeks, Danny decided I needed a night out to change things up. We put on our boots and went to the Half Pint. Saturday nights were always busy with line dancing, meaning there would be plenty of people around. Danny and I found seats at the bar and enjoyed a few drinks. I had realized that it often took a little boost to help me socialize, especially when it came to dancing. The Half Pint felt like a new version of an Old West bar, creating a friendly vibe with a long history as one of the oldest running bars in the country and the oldest still operating place in the upper Midwest. Rumor has it that even Frank and Jesse James stopped by this bar around 1880. Danny and I met up with 2 friends, Meg and Diana, who both volunteered with the local rescue squad. We were having a great time together. They enjoyed a night out while their husbands stayed home since they weren't interested in line dancing. I had no romantic feelings for either of them because I was friends with their husbands, who were also local firemen. At around 11 o'clock, the whole bar moved to the dance floor for Brooks and Dunn's song Boot Scootin' Boogie, a favorite for line dancing night at the Half Pint. Meg and Diana joined us, and we all had a lot of fun, even though Danny and I weren't the best dancers. The women seemed to find it easier to enjoy the music and move. As we walked back to our table, I caught sight of her and froze. It had been 3 weeks since she had left, and there was Darla sitting in a corner booth with Randy and some friends. To his credit, Randy was having a soft drink, and Darla was too. I felt a bit let down. I wanted to say I told you so, but I honestly wished her well. Just as I was about to look away, she spotted me. After a few words with Randy, she came over to our table, making Danny, Meg, and Diana aware that things could get awkward. "Hey, Dalton," she said, followed by polite greetings to the others. I pretended to focus on my drink. Dalton, do you have a minute to talk?" I glanced over at my friends, who looked a bit uneasy. I knew they must feel awkward too, especially since Darla had left me, and everyone in town likely knew. I stood up and headed outside, knowing it was usually best to find a quieter place for a serious talk. We stepped outside and around the corner, stopping in front of a nearby insurance office. "Well, you wanted to talk," I said, keeping my tone calm. "What's going on?" Darla looked taken aback by my straightforwardness. Well, I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm fine." She stood there, waiting for more. "Just fine?" "Yes, I'm fine. Danny's fine. Meg's fine. Diana's fine. We're all fine. Everybody's fine. Aren't you going to ask how the kids and I are doing? Do you want to tell me how the kids are doing?" "Well," she began, clearly wishing she hadn't started this conversation, "I just thought you would like to know that the kids are good. But I thought you might like to know that they miss you too." I didn't say anything, just waiting for Darla to decide she wanted to stop talking so we could go back inside. "Dalton, come on. Please don't act like this," she asked. "Act like what?" I replied. "Like this," she said. "I still want us to be friends, Dalton. The kids want you to be their friend too." "Wow," I said with a small laugh. "A few months ago, you were saying how good a father I could be to them. You even said I was a natural and that they could finally have a real dad." "We were in a different place then, Dalton. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. But I want my kids to have a chance at being a real family, with the one they started with. Randy has changed a lot. Actually, the kids and I all think he's become a lot like—" She paused, knowing she shouldn't finish that thought. But I answered for her. Me? Is that what you were going to say, Darla? That Randy is a lot like me? Let me remind you of a few things. I've always supported you. I've never lost my temper or put my own problems before my family. I've always tried to be there for you and the kids. So please tell me again what it is that you see that makes you think Randy and I have so much in common. Darla took a deep breath and tried to collect herself. I just meant that Randy has changed, Dalton. I want you to be happy for us. I want you to be happy for Natalie and Nathan. I can't say I'm happy for you, Darla. I think you went back to a situation that isn't good for any of you. I'm worried it won't be long before things start to go wrong again and you'll be in trouble like before. No, Dalton, you're wrong. Randy has really changed. He's not the same man anymore. You can believe what you want, but don't talk to me in public, or anywhere else for that matter, and expect me to support your choice to go back to a situation that was bad for you and your family. Now, if you'll excuse me, my friends are waiting for me. I walked away and went back into the bar, sitting down with Danny, Meg, and Diana. I could see Darla walk back in and sit next to Randy. He noticed she was upset and started talking to her. Darla just shook her head a few times and took a sip of her soda. Randy looked over at me with a frown. I shook my head and mouthed the word, "Don't." A couple of months went by, and I didn't feel any better about my situation. I didn't have the interest or energy to jump back into looking for someone special. I thought I had something special with Darla, but that didn't work out well. Part of the issue was that people felt the need to tell me how Darla, Randy, and the kids were doing, even when I didn't ask. When Darla first left, some of her friends and family casually mentioned that she and the kids were doing fine and seemed happy. Over time, things seemed to change. Even Meg and Diana, who had become close to Darla, hinted that not everything was okay between Darla and Randy. I stayed quiet and didn't ask for more details, even though I knew Meg and Diana wanted to share. It was early July when Danny suggested we go to Red River Falls for dinner and a couple of drinks at the End Zone, a popular spot. Getting away from Royal Fork sounded great. We invited Meg, Diana, and their husbands, but they couldn't make it, so it was just Danny and me. We reached the restaurant around 5 o'clock, and it was beginning to fill up. With an hour left until the Twins and Brewers played, there were plenty of TVs around to watch the game. I ordered a big guacamole burger, and Danny chose a cowboy griller, which was a hearty sandwich. Danny would definitely need his drink to handle the spice. We had been there about an hour when the Brewers scored first. Just when I thought that would be the worst news of the night, I quickly realized I was mistaken. "Look who just walked in," Danny said, nodding toward the entrance. I turned to see Randy and 4 of his friends coming in. Randy spotted us almost immediately, said something to his friends, and headed our way. "Hey, Danny." "Dalton," he said with a fake smile. "How's everyone tonight?" he asked, trying to sound friendly. "Do you really care, Randy? Or is this just small talk to get through what we all know is a pretty awkward moment?" I shot back. "Dalton," Danny whispered, trying to calm me down. "Let's just relax, okay?" "Yeah, I'm just being friendly here," Randy said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Were you being friendly when you took Darla and the kids away from me?" I asked. "Listen, Dalton, that was my wife for several months. The least you could have done was wait until the divorce was final." "Sure. Did you visit her in my house? Or did you at least consider keeping it private? After all, that's where I found all your used cigarette butts." All right, Randy said, backing off. "Looks like I've upset you by interrupting you and Danny here. I'll just go back to my friends and leave you two alone." "Watch it, Randy," Danny replied, a bit annoyed. "I'll keep Dalton calm, but we're not really friends. You don't want me as an enemy either." Randy had a confident smile on his face as Danny urged him away from our seats. Finally, he sat with his friends on the other side of the restaurant, a good distance away. "Man, Danny," I said, feeling bad about the whole situation. "I'm sorry, maybe we should just go home." "No way! We came here to enjoy ourselves, eat some good food, have some drinks, and cheer for the Twins. If we leave now, that guy wins, Dalton." "Yeah, I guess you're right. We should be fine to drive after another round, right?" "Sounds good to me." We watched the game for a while until we noticed a waitress in referee-style outfits bringing out a large tray of tall drinks. She stopped at Randy's table and poured a drink for each of the guys. "I've been waiting for this," "This is going to be great," I heard Randy say. "Oh no," I whispered, nudging Danny. "Looks like Randy is about to have a problem." "Come on, Dalton," Danny said, annoyed. "Just forget about—" But Danny stopped as he saw Randy take a sip of his drink. "Oh no, that doesn't look like a soda." I couldn't help but watch as they quickly finished their first round of drinks and soon ordered another. They kept it up for most of the time we were there. By the time it was 9 p.m., the twins had lost to the Brewers. I kept glancing at Randy and his friends. At one point, Randy noticed me and raised his glass in a silly toast, with laughter from his friends. We were just about to pay our bill for the night. Danny and I had each had 3 drinks along with our meals during our nearly 5 hours at the end zone. It was almost 10 o'clock when we settled our bill and got ready to leave. Suddenly, I felt someone tap my shoulder and turned to find Randy standing there. "Hey, Dalton," he slurred, showing he had a bit too much to drink. "I just wanted to say there are no hard feelings, okay?" "Back off, Randy, you're drunk," Danny warned. "I'm not that bad," he protested. "Tell me something, Randy," I said, trying to stay calm. "How far did you fall off the wagon? Did it hurt?" "Oh, I see," Randy said slowly. "You're still upset about Donna, right?" He continued to follow us out of the restaurant, along with his equally tipsy friends. "You want to know why Darla came back to me, Dalton? It's because she really cares about me. I might not be as tall as you and Danny, but I have my own way to impress her," he shouted, and his friends chuckled. "By the way, I appreciate that you don't feel threatened by me. Darla is just as wonderful as I remembered. Did you know both our kids were born through surgery? It's true. I was reaching my limit. Danny sensed it too. Dalton, just relax. He's trying to get under your skin." "Yeah, well, he's close," I replied as we got to my car. That's when Randy made a mistake by putting his hand on my shoulder and turning me around. "Hey, man," he said, slurring his words. "It's rude to walk away while I'm talking." "Everyone back off now," Danny warned. "I'm a deputy sheriff, and I'll call the police if you don't turn around and leave." "I'm not scared of you," one of Randy's friends said defiantly. "Yeah, what's wrong, Dalton? You need him to protect you?" Randy taunted. Then he pushed me against my car. Without thinking, I reacted instinctively. I threw a quick punch, catching Randy right on the chin. He stumbled back and fell hard onto the pavement, knocked out before he even hit the ground. "Oh, no!" Danny shouted as 2 of Randy's friends began to move towards him. Danny quickly handled the first attacker by grabbing his wrist and arm, forcing him down to his knees. But with 3 more to deal with, he applied more pressure, making the man cry out before pushing him back with a kick to the chest. The man went down but didn't give up. "Come on!" I called out to another guy, catching his attention. I took a defensive stance, pretending to strike at his head. As he moved closer, I kicked him sharply in the stomach, and he fell to the ground in pain. The next attacker was confused by what just happened. I kept going, delivering a strong elbow to his face, which sent him crashing to the ground. I looked over at Danny, who had controlled the 2 men he was with. Luckily, the group was too drunk to be much of a threat. One of Danny's opponents started to back down, pulling out a large knife. Danny quickly took action, showing his training. "Mason County Deputy Sheriff, drop the weapon!" Seeing the seriousness of the moment, the man dropped the knife. Meanwhile, the guy I had just knocked down was getting up, looking at me with anger. I quickly closed the gap and struck him with my knee, making him lose consciousness. Danny was calling out to me, but I couldn't hear him over the adrenaline. My focus returned to Randy Jones, who was now trying to wake up. Randy fell to his knees and shouted something I couldn't understand before he tried to reach out. I focused my energy and hit him hard on the nose. Blood started to flow as Randy was knocked back onto the ground. I felt a sharp pain in my right hand and realized I might have hurt it. Just then, I heard Danny's voice breaking through my anger. "Dalton, please stop! It's over! If this continues, we could both end up in trouble." I paused to look around. Danny still had his weapon aimed at the man who had threatened us. 4 men were on the ground, and a crowd was starting to form. I could hear sirens approaching. The whole incident had taken just over a minute since Randy had first confronted me. Under the bright lights, I noticed a red spot on the pavement along with a few white marks. Later, I would find out that my actions had accidentally caused Randy to hurt himself. Soon, a police car from the Red River Falls Police Department pulled up quickly. The officer got out and drew his gun, aiming it at Danny. "Police! Drop your weapon! Now!" the officer shouted. "Mason County Sheriff Deputy," Danny said, showing his badge with one hand while still pointing his gun at the other man. "This guy threatened us and threw a knife over there," he pointed out. "You nearly ran over it." The young officer, looking nervous, watched as Danny took control of the situation. He relaxed a bit but still called for backup, reporting a disturbance. Within a couple of minutes, 3 more police cars arrived, including one with Police Captain Pete Sturgeon. Danny looked worried when he saw the captain, but he didn't explain why. I felt uneasy when 2 ambulances arrived to help the people involved. I knew I had hurt Randy and his friend Wade in the scuffle. When my friend and coworker Monica came over and asked if I was okay, I simply said, "Yes." I thought my hand might be hurt, but I was putting off going to check it out. Danny and I were asked many questions about what happened and who caused the fight. The officers seemed particularly interested in the fact that a deputy was involved. About 30 minutes later, a blue truck pulled into the parking lot. I saw Danny take a breath as he watched it park. It was hard to tell if he felt relief or worry. As the driver got out, I saw it was Danny's boss, Pat Quinn, the sheriff of Mason County. He walked over to where Danny and I stood by one of the ambulances. Danny tried to say something, but Pat gave him a serious look and said, "Not now." Pat then went to talk with the police captain, Pete Sturgeon. "So, what's happening, Pete?" Pat asked. "Well, it seems one of your deputies was in a fight tonight, Sheriff," Pete replied. "Yes, it seems that way," Pat said, looking a bit frustrated. "What do you know about how it started?" "2 people have already gone to the hospital. It looks like your deputy and his friend were involved," Pete explained. "Others said that Randy was upset by Anderson and your deputy." "I hope you're considering Danny's side of the situation too, Pete," Quinn said, clearly not happy. "We're collecting everyone's stories to see what happened. I understand the process, believe me," Pete answered. "Well, I'm going inside to talk to the manager," Pat said as he headed for the door. "What can the manager do?" "She was inside the whole time," Pete asked. "Do you see those cameras on the corners of the buildings? They probably caught the whole thing." "I think there might be cameras inside, too, that could show what happened," Pat pointed out. Pete looked surprised. "I know there are cameras, Pat, but we still need statements." "Maybe you could save some time by asking the manager to check the footage," Quinn suggested as he went inside. "I can help with that if you want." 3 patrol officers, a sergeant, and a lieutenant tried to hide their laughs, feeling a bit embarrassed for their captain. It was clear they hadn't noticed the cameras either. In fact, I only noticed them now that Quinn had pointed them out. To someone not paying attention, they looked more like burned-out lights and blended in with the rest of the exterior lighting of the end zone. Sturgeon eventually followed Quinn inside the restaurant. They spent almost 30 minutes in there, and my hand was starting to hurt more with each passing moment. Finally, Sturgeon and Quinn came back outside. They told us that Randy Jones, Wade Ryan, and the rest of their group would face charges for their behavior. Danny and I were told we wouldn't be charged, but we should be careful since the investigation was still going on, and there was a chance we could be involved later. Danny thought it was unlikely since they hadn't charged us right away, but I was still worried. It was almost midnight when the police wrapped things up. Randy Jones and Wade Ryan would find out about their situation at the hospital. We all had either a breath test or a blood test for Randy and Wade, but Danny and I came back with low results, well below the legal limit. The others registered much higher. "Are you too proud of yourselves?" Quinn asked as he approached me and Danny. "Listen, Pat, it wasn't our fault," Danny tried to explain. "I know," Pat replied. "I saw the video. You were provoked inside the restaurant, and you let those people follow you to the parking lot. What you should have done was call for help when they started following you. Did you think nothing would happen?" Danny and I looked away, feeling ashamed. "People like that," Pat continued, "are just looking for a reaction. And guess what? You gave them exactly what they wanted." "Pat, let me explain," Danny began, but Pat interrupted. "Don't even start, Danny. How do you think I'll feel explaining to everyone that one of my deputies was in a bar, got into a public fight, and even pulled out his gun during it?" "He pulled a weapon on me. I had a real reason to fear," Danny said. "I know, I get it. Technically, you might have been right to respond more strongly. Would that make you feel any better?" "No," Danny replied quietly. "It's my fault, Sheriff," I added, trying to take some of the blame off Danny. "It's both your faults," Pat corrected us. How do you think Chief Van Dyke will react when he hears about this? Do you think Jerry will congratulate you? Definitely not, I admitted. My boss, Chief Gerald Van Dyke, cared a lot about his department's image, and I might be facing a suspension, whether I was charged or not. You didn't think about that, did you? Well, I'll have plenty of time to think about it later. I think I hurt my hand. Yeah, I'm sure Van Dyke will be thrilled about that. I bet he'll have to pay extra to cover your shifts for the next few weeks. All right, Pat, we get it, Danny interrupted. Look, we got caught in a tough situation, okay? But it wasn't just some random fight. This guy was targeting Dalton. He confronted us the minute he walked in and was difficult from the start. Dalton was in a relationship with Darla Jones for over 6 months, and she had been living with him for about 4 months, he said, looking at me. A little over 4, I confirmed. Yeah, 4 months, Danny continued. Darla and Randy were getting a divorce. They were only about a month away from finalizing it. Then Randy came back to town. He started making all sorts of sweet talk and promises. He got into Darla's mind and began seeing her without Dalton knowing. Eventually, Darla decided to leave Dalton and return to Randy. Tonight was just Randy showing off and trying to make Dalton look bad in front of everyone at the restaurant. I winced as Danny talked, but strangely, Sheriff Quinn seemed to feel the same way. He began to calm down and rubbed his face. The tough sheriff was starting to show a softer side. Randy Jones, Randy Jones, Randy Jones, Quinn said, shaking his head and pacing back and forth. You know him? I asked. Of course I know who Randy Jones is. He's not the brightest. I gave him his first drinking-related charge about 6 years ago when I was with the Red River Police. Danny and I both shared a light laugh. Listen, guys, Quinn said, much more relaxed now. I'm going to step down from my speech. Like I said, people like Randy Jones are great at one thing, getting under others' skin and causing reactions. Danny, I expect you to do better than that. And I know Chief Van Dyke expects you to too, Dalton. You two are the good ones. People like Randy want nothing more than to drag you down. Just one more thing, Dalton, Quinn continued. You mentioned your relationship with Darla was over, but have you thought about how all this could affect her? No, I replied sharply. Honestly, I don't care. I told her the day she left that I wouldn't be her second choice. I warned her that Randy's problems would come back. I can't believe it took this long. Yeah, me too, Pat added. But you know, my ex-wife and I didn't end things well. We actually got colder toward each other after the divorce. Still, even after all that, I care about Clarissa. I bet you might still care about Darla, too. So I'd think about how tonight's events could affect her and their kids, if they have any. They have two, a boy and a girl, I said. You and Danny made quite an impression on Randy and his friends tonight. Once Randy sobers up and gets bailed out, how do you think he'll feel knowing he got in trouble because of his ex-partner's actions? Just something to think about. But if I were you, I'd keep an eye on Darla and the kids in case Randy reacts poorly. I hadn't considered that. I will, Sheriff, I said. Hey, Sheriff, do you think Danny and I might still get charged with disorderly conduct? Not a chance, Quinn smiled. Are you sure? What if the police department asks for charges from the county attorney? They seemed pretty quick to get someone in trouble tonight. Sheriff Quinn chuckled. Don't worry about that at all, Dalton. I can talk our county attorney, Marion Lawson, into this. If I say you won't have any charges, then you won't. Quinn chuckled all the way back to his truck, and Danny took me to the emergency department. An x-ray showed that I had a broken bone in my hand. They put a cast on it, and I would need to take time off work for about 6 to 8 weeks. Luckily, I had short-term disability through the city, so I wouldn't lose any pay. As expected, Quinn was right. Chief Van Dyke was not pleased. He didn't suspend me, but he did give me a formal warning. This meant I could be suspended without pay for any future issues, whether I was working or not, over the next 2 years. Fortunately, my local firefighters union stepped in and filed a complaint for me. The physical and video evidence showed that I wasn't the one who started the fight. A hearing was held to look into the issue, and it worked out in my favor. Chief Van Dyke was not happy about it, but accepted the decision. The whole situation gave me some time off for the rest of July and part of August. I kept myself busy by working on some home projects. I could still mow my lawn without much trouble and tackled a few other tasks. My work shifts at Eagle Star were canceled for the next couple of months with little fuss. One of the full-time paramedics, Alex Trotman, was more than willing to take on extra hours with the rest of the team. Even though I couldn't work at RRFFD while on sick leave, I still decided to respond to calls for the Royal Fork Fire and Rescue, but only for medical calls, as long as I didn't have to lift anyone. We had a solid group of people who always answered calls, and it was rare to have fewer than 4 or 5 responders show up. In late July, we were facing a strong heat wave. Temperatures were often in the mid-90s, which isn't too bad compared to some places out west. However, in the upper Midwest, the high humidity had been consistently over 85% during the heat wave. With humidity that high, it's hard to cool down because the air is so moist. You can sweat, but it doesn't evaporate, making you feel warm and sticky all the time, not in a good way. July had been a tough month for Randy Jones. He had been charged with assault, public intoxication, and disorderly conduct. He was also missing a few teeth and was likely facing at least 30 days in jail, possibly up to 60 days. That was only if his court-appointed attorney could get the charges reduced from misdemeanor assault to a lesser charge. The situation of public drunkenness and improper behavior might end with just a night in jail. However, Randy was also at risk of losing his well-paying welding job with an oil company up north. He earned about $50 an hour, which meant he was making over 6 figures when he worked overtime. Randy was staying in a company house for a week at a time and then heading home for a week, often working 12 to 16 hours a day and earning good money. The trouble was, he was spending that money just as quickly. No one knew where it was going. Darla and the kids were still in the same apartment they had before the divorce, which showed that Randy had not made things any better for them financially. When you mix the intense heat of summer with personal and legal problems, it can create a tense environment. People in emergency services know that calls for help often rise during heat waves. On a Friday afternoon, the temperature reached 96 degrees with high humidity, making it a very uncomfortable day. Our local pool had to turn people away because so many were looking to cool off. Then, around 4:30 p.m., the pager went off. Royal Fork Fire and Rescue. Royal Fork Fire and Rescue. You are needed for a medical response at 431 4th Avenue Northeast. Again, you are needed for a medical response at 431 4th Avenue Northeast for a female patient in distress. Mason County deputies and State Patrol have also been sent. Time of call is 4:27 p.m. Oh no! That was Darla's parents' house. I grabbed my keys and hurried to my car, then sped to the fire station on Main Street. The ambulance was already outside with its emergency lights on. I parked and quickly got on board. Jake Herman was driving today along with Meg, Diana, and Misty Kiefer, another volunteer EMT. I took the front seat with Jake and handled the radio. Mason County Dispatch, this is Royal Fork Rescue, Adam 401. You can show us en route to 431 4th Avenue Northeast. We'll wait about 2 blocks away until law enforcement says it's safe to go in. 10-4, Adam 401. Mason County Deputy 17. 15 is almost on site and will update when it's safe to approach. You're en route at 4:31 p.m. We reached the area in under 2 minutes, and my stomach was a bundle of nerves. Dispatch, Adam 401 is in the area. Please let us know when we can go in. Copy, Adam 401. 17, 15 says the situation is safe to approach. 10-4 dispatch, we're on the scene. We quickly drove the last 2 blocks until we reached Darla's parents' house. It looked like a typical ranch home with a 1-car garage, and it was in decent shape. Darla's dad, Butch Kent, had spent his entire life working at the town lumber yard. He wasn't rich, but he provided well for his family. As we walked up to the house, Danny gave me a serious nod. We stepped inside, and I saw Butch and Cecilia, Darla's mom, both looking very upset. They were by the sofa next to their daughter. My heart sank as I saw Darla. Her face was badly hurt. One eye was almost completely shut, and there was a deep cut above her eyebrow that looked painful. Her cheek was swollen, and her lip was badly hurt too. She had many bruises on her arms, likely from trying to protect herself. Her right wrist was bent in an odd way, which looked broken. Darla was holding her ribs and stomach, clearly hurt. "Butch, Cecilia, can you tell me what happened?" I asked gently. Butch stammered through tears. "A man named Randy came over and hurt her while we were gone for a little while." Suddenly I realized something. Where are Natalie and Nathan? "They're next door playing," Cecilia said through her tears. At least they didn't see this. I carefully looked at Darla. There were no serious signs of head injury, which was good to see. Her pupils were the same size, but they were a bit large. She seemed to have a concussion and didn't recognize me at first. There were some bruises on her neck that suggested he had tried to choke her. Darla had deep bruises on her chest. I listened to her breathing and was relieved it sounded okay. She flinched a bit when I checked her stomach, but everything seemed normal, which meant she likely wasn't bleeding inside. Let's get the cot and get her ready to go, I told the team. Jake and Misty quickly grabbed the cot while Meg and Diana took care of Darla's vital signs. Her blood pressure was a little high and her pulse was low, which might mean a head injury. We wouldn't know for sure until she had more tests at the hospital. Her oxygen levels looked good, though. We moved Darla from the sofa to the cot carefully, and she made a slight sound of discomfort. We hurried to get her into the ambulance. Jake drove, while Meg, Diana, Misty, and I stayed with Darla in the back. I grabbed the IV kit to start an IV in her hand. I was glad I was left-handed, which made it easier to do. A good sign was when Darla woke up and opened her right eye as I gently put in the needle. Darla really didn't like needles or anything that stung. For a little while, she seemed aware as I started setting up the IV, but when she saw me, a look of worry crossed her face. She seemed shy and quickly turned her head away. "Darla, can you hear me?" I asked softly. She stayed silent but nodded her head, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "It'll only hurt a little bit until I get the IV in, okay?" She winced slightly as I inserted the needle. I found a vein in her left hand, and blood filled the IV tube quickly. I took out the needle, pressed gently on the vein, and connected the IV tubing to begin a slow drip of normal saline. Diana put on the patches for our heart monitor, which showed that Darla's heart rate was around 70 beats per minute, and her blood pressure was 132/88ths, showing that she was getting a bit better. I kept asking Darla questions as I treated her on our way to the hospital. I took a bottle of clean water, wet a washcloth, and carefully wiped the blood from her lips, nose, and eyes. We had also put a splint on her right wrist, which looked bad, but she still had a strong pulse and good color in her right hand. Darla answered my questions with small shakes or nods of her head and kept crying softly, avoiding eye contact with me. I felt helpless to take away her pain. Then it hit me that my earlier fight with Randy must have led to what happened to Darla, and I began to feel a deep regret. But it was clear that Darla was feeling even more ashamed and embarrassed. Everything I had feared about Randy had turned out to be true. Concerned, I stood up, moved closer to her, and sat down, facing her directly. I gently lifted her legs and moved closer, unbuckling the belts that held her down. I helped her sit up, feeling a bit awkward with the splint on my own hand. I placed Darla's hurt arm behind my back and softly pulled her into a hug. She rested her head on my shoulder and started to cry. I stayed quiet, looking ahead in the ambulance, holding her close to show her she was safe for now. "Oh God, Dalton," she cried. I'm so sorry." Tears filled my own eyes as I felt her pain. The other 3 girls in the back of the ambulance watched us with concern, tears shining in their eyes. Diana and Misty covered their mouths to hold back their own tears. I nodded to Meg to update the hospital on our situation, which she did right away. I kept holding Darla, gently telling her that everything would be okay. By the time we reached the hospital, she had calmed down a bit, though she still occasionally whimpered. I gently laid her back on the cot and secured the straps before taking her hand as we moved her into the emergency department at Holy Family Medical Center, carefully transferring her from the cot to the bed. Nurse Shelley Stebbins took over for Darla. As we wheeled her in, I noticed the shock and concern on Shelley's face, upset by what had happened to someone who should have felt safe. 30-year-old female. Her doctor is Dr. Laughlin. She was attacked. No bleeding or fluid in the ears. Right wrist is broken, left eye is badly swollen, and there's a cut on her bottom lip. Heavy bruising on both sides of her ribs. Her stomach feels normal. Lung and stomach sounds are clear. There are bite marks on both sides of her body. I saw Shelley gasp a little at that last part. 18-gauge IV in her left hand with normal saline running at a low speed. "Did you give her anything for pain?" Shelley asked. "No. She might have a concussion, and we didn't want to affect her healing too much." "Okay, Dalton, thanks. I'll handle it from here. she said, starting to take care of Darla. Dalton? I turned back as Darla weakly called for me. Yeah? Please don't leave me, will you stay? I felt unsure. I didn't know what to say. Your mom and dad are on their way to the hospital. They should be here soon. Your kids will stay at your parents' house. I don't care. Please stay with me. I have to go, Darla. I need to return with the ambulance. I have to write the report and help ready the ambulance for the next call. I'm really sorry. She started to cry again as I gently pulled my hand away and walked to the door. I took one last look back at her, feeling heavy in my heart, but I knew I couldn't watch her suffer any longer. I went back to the ambulance garage where the team was finishing up getting everything ready. I had picked up the necessary paperwork and insurance forms and placed them in the front seat. Then I noticed Jake, Misty, Meg, and Diana were all looking at me. What? I said, feeling a little irritated. Dalton, can we talk? Diana asked. I set down the paperwork and followed her outside to a quiet spot. What are you doing? She demanded. I'm helping get the ambulance back in service, I replied. Why? Because the call is over, and it's time to go home, I explained. You need to go back in there and be with her, Dalton. Her parents will be here soon. She has plenty of family and friends who can take care of her now. I don't agree. You know she needs your support right now, Dalton. Don't pretend you don't know it. What do you want me to do? I want you to be there for her. We all saw how much comfort you brought earlier. Just being nearby is what she needs now. I did what I could. Now it's time to go home. Diana said. You're not getting off that easy. What else do you want from me? Dalton, you're part of the reason this happened. I won't accept that. You can't place the blame on me. I can't control what others do. Come on, Dalton. You and Danny had a conflict with Randy and his friends weeks ago. They faced consequences while you two didn't. Now Randy is in a bad spot, and he sees you tied to his issues through Darla. Do you see that? Yes, I understand, Diana, but this doesn't mean I'm at fault for it. It might not be all your fault, Dalton, but you can't deny you have some part in this. Oh, really? Well, if we're tracing things back, we can go to the day when Darla left me feeling completely crushed in front of my house, watching her and the kids leave with someone else. Diana took a deep breath. I know, Dalton. I understand she hurt you. We were all let down when she went back to him. None of us could believe it. We felt for you too, Dalton, but that's in the past. You saw how he treated her today. You saw what kind of person he is. Yes, it's a chain of events, but you're part of that chain. You have a duty to her, Dalton. Right now, she needs you more than ever. I need to go back, Diana. I still have a report to write about this, and... Oh, come on, Dalton. Just give me the paperwork. I can write the report just as well as anyone else. I know your computer password. I'll type it up and sign your name, okay? I turned and shook my head. If I stayed, I was going to lose my cool. Forget it. Let's just go. I can always come back later. I walked back into the garage. It was clear that Jake, Misty, and Meg had been listening. They stood there looking disappointed. I took a seat in the front passenger area. Jake was about to start the engine when he paused. Actually, he said, I think I'll sit in the back with the girls. He got out of the driver's seat and joined Meg, Diana, and Misty in the back. I sat there, surprised for a moment. They were all upset with me, and it showed. I got out, walked around to the other side of the ambulance, jumped in, and turned the key. It was a little tricky driving with my right hand in a splint, but I managed. Does anyone want to stop for a drink or a snack on the way back? We usually got something after our trip to Red River Falls, but the silence that answered me told me everything I needed to know. I really could have used a cold Coke at that moment, but there was no point in making things worse by stopping for one. Besides, they probably wouldn't have waited for me if I didn't make sure to take the keys inside. So it was a really quiet 40-minute ride back to Royal Fork. I helped restock the ambulance without saying a word, just like everyone else. Once we were done, Meg, Diana, Misty, and Jake all left the fire station, leaving me to finish the run report. I got home about half an hour later and grabbed a drink from the fridge, making sure I wouldn't have to respond to any EMS calls for the rest of the night. That was probably for the best, given how my fellow volunteers at Royal Fork Fire and Rescue looked at me. I sank into my favorite recliner and turned on the television, hoping to catch the Twins versus Red Sox game. But even with the TV on and a cold drink in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that my house felt emptier than when Darla and the kids had left. I started to wonder if I would ever feel better about myself. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was one of those mornings when I just wanted to stay in bed, but I reluctantly reached over and answered. Hello? Dalton? Yeah. Who's this? This is Cecilia. Oh, hi, Cecilia, I said, sitting up in bed. How are you? I'm fine, Dalton, but I'm not the one you should be worried about. Oh, right. How's Darla? I asked, curious. She has surgery scheduled for this morning. She asked me to call you and see if you could be there. Surgery? For what? Randy really hurt her wrist. He managed to injure it in 3 places. They scheduled her for 10 o'clock. I rubbed my face in frustration. I'm not sure I can make it by then, I said, looking at the clock. Dalton, Cecilia said, sounding serious, Darla really needs you there. You're the one person who has ever stood up for her. I'm also partly why she got hurt yesterday, Cecilia. I can only imagine how upset you and Butch are with me right now. Stop it, Dalton. Get out of your own way. Randy has needed to be confronted for years. I'm surprised it took this long. You might have helped set things in motion, but you did not make Randy act that way. That was his choice. Now what time can we expect to see you? I let out a sigh. Let me get ready and grab some coffee and breakfast. I'll be over as soon as I can. Thanks, Dalton. This will mean a lot to her. I know. I hung up the phone and headed for a shower. It was easier now that I had a splint on my right hand instead of the heavy cast I wore for 3 weeks after I had a fight. By the time I got on the road, it was almost 9 o'clock. I worried that Darla's injury must be serious if they planned surgery for a Saturday morning. I hoped there wouldn't be too much damage and that she would be able to use her hand again. I arrived at the hospital too late to see Darla before they took her to surgery. Cecilia told me Darla was a bit sad I wasn't there yet, but felt better knowing I was on my way. If I'm honest, part of me didn't want to see her yet. The surgery took about an hour and a half. I stayed in the waiting room while Cecilia and Butch went in to see her when she got back to recovery. After about 20 minutes, Cecilia came out and asked if I wanted to see Darla. No, I think I'll wait out here. It's fine, Dalton. They only allow 2 visitors at a time. You and Butch can go back together. I know it would mean a lot to her. If I go back, I'd prefer to see her alone. You know? I understand, she nodded. She went back, and soon she and Butch returned. Go on back, Dalton, Butch said. She's still a bit out of it, but she'll at least know you're here. I hoped they wouldn't take long. Honestly, I had the chance to leave when they went to see her, but I got up and walked through the double doors. A nurse greeted me and led me to the recovery room. I was lucky to see her at all, as many hospitals don't allow visitors in recovery. Darla was still sleeping. They had carefully closed the injury above her left eye, and I hoped the scar would fade. Her bottom lip was also healing well. Her right hand and wrist were wrapped, probably needing a cast soon. I thought it was strange that we both had injuries to our right hands. I stood there for almost 20 minutes just watching her. There was a time I admired her small size and charm. But now, simply reaching down to hold her hand made me nervous, and I quickly let go, worried I might hurt her more. As I did, Darla stirred and asked who was there. I didn't say anything and decided it was time to go. I couldn't bear to look at her any longer, knowing my part in her situation. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not from sadness, but because of shame. I walked back to the waiting area and saw Butch and Cecilia still sitting there. They asked if anything was wrong, and I said no. I lied and told them that she was waking up and asking for them. They both smiled and thanked me, then got up and headed toward the recovery room. I was almost at the end of the hall and had just hit the elevator button when I heard Butch call out to me. Dalton, wait a moment. I turned around and saw him rushing to catch up. I just wanted to say that Cecilia and I really appreciate everything you've done for Darla. Sure, right, I said, trying to hold back my tears. What do you mean by that? The elevator doors opened. It means, I said as I stepped inside, that I'm partially to blame for her being here. To my surprise, Butch stepped in with me. Listen to me, Dalton, this is not your fault. Yes, it is, Butch. I'm surprised you and Cecilia can even look at me right now. I let Randy get to me and it hurt Darla. Yes, he did, Dalton, but you're the first person who's ever stood up to him. He knows you won't let him walk all over you. If I were younger and healthier, I would have done it myself. My friend's boss was right, I said, shaking my head. He warned me this would happen. I just didn't listen. The elevator arrived at the main level, and I walked toward the entrance with Butch following closely. Cecilia and I tried hard to convince Darla not to go out with that guy, but she wouldn't listen. I know how stubborn she can be, but I believe that if you give her another chance, she'll show you she can change, Dalton. I don't think so, Butch. I've caused enough trouble. It's time for me to step back. I turned to him, shook his hand quickly, and started toward my car. Butch, with his bad hip, couldn't keep up. Darla got out of the hospital the next day. They kept her an extra night because her blood pressure was a little low after the surgery. She went back to her parents' house to stay with them for a few days. The problem was, no one seemed to know where Randy Jones was. An alert had been sent out for him and his vehicle. Everyone thought it would be safer for Darla to find a new place to stay. Callahan Manufacturing kindly offered her a leave of absence until she could get her life in order. Sadly, she wouldn't get paid, but at least she wouldn't lose her job. A few weeks later, Darla and the kids moved into the Karen Cumberland house, a modern and secure women's shelter in Red River Falls. The building had cameras watching both the outside and the inside, along with alarms that could be pressed in case of an emergency. This setup helped people get help quickly, as the alarm showed exactly where help was needed without having to call for it. The strong doors and safe windows were designed to keep unwanted visitors out rather than to keep people inside. There was a waiting area at the front where visitors could be checked before entering. After Darla and the kids moved into the Cumberland house, I went back to my job at the fire department. My hands still hurt a little now and then, but I was able to lift people and do my paramedic work without much trouble. I had been keeping my distance from Darla since she got out of the hospital. It was hard to see her because I felt the heaviness of the situation and my part in it. Even though I didn't want to take responsibility, I knew I had to face my feelings. Eventually, I found the courage to see her and drove to the Cumberland house after one of my shifts. I brought gifts for Natalie and Nathan and a bunch of flowers for Darla, choosing carnations instead of roses for reasons I couldn't explain. When I got there, I pressed the buzzer at the security door. A small opening slid open and a woman looked out, asking me straight away, "What do you want?" "I'd like to see Darla Jones, if that's okay," I answered, wanting to sound sure of myself. "Does Darla know you're looking for her?" she replied, raising her eyebrow. "Not really," I admitted. "You should call first if you want to see someone," she advised. "I understand, I'm sorry. I can come back if that's better. Can I leave the flowers and gifts with you?" She then looked at my uniform. "What kind of uniform is that?" "My uniform? I work for the Red River Falls Fire Department." "Fire department? You look a bit like a police officer," she said. I laughed. "No, I'm definitely not a cop. Look!" I pointed to my uniform patch. "That's from the fire department." She said, still looking doubtful. "You still look like law enforcement." "What's your name, anyway?" I asked. Dalton Anderson," she replied. "Wait right there," she said as she closed the slot. I could hear her speaking on the intercom. "Hey, Darla Jones, there are some firefighters here for you. One of them's kind of cute." I bet my face turned bright red as I could hear laughter from the women after that. Then there was a loud buzz from the door signaling it was open, and I stepped inside. There stood Darla on the other side. She looked wonderful, definitely much better than the last time I had seen her. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow and another below her lip, reminders of her past struggles. Luckily, the bruises on her face were gone, although she still had a removable cast on her right arm. "Hi," I said, my heart beating fast. "Hi there," she replied with a friendly smile. We shared a quick hug, but my hands were full with flowers and gifts. "I wanted to stop by on my way home from work to say hello to you and the kids," I said, trying to sound relaxed. "That's really nice, Dalton. They've missed you a lot," she said, fidgeting with her hands. "We all have." Can we see the kids? I have some gifts for them." "Of course. They'll be so happy. They're upstairs in the playroom." Darla took me into the big room, which was spacious and used for both dining and activities. The kitchen was set up for many people to help cook meals together. The shelter's offices were also on this level. We went through another set of secure doors as Darla led me upstairs to the second floor, where the sleeping areas were. Some rooms were just for one person, while others had several occupants, especially women with children. Darla's home had 2 small bedrooms, a common area, and a bathroom. It was small, but she said it was very comfortable for the 3 of them. After passing through another secure door, we reached the third floor, which had more living spaces and a large area for kids to play. As we got closer to the play area, both Natalie and Nathan shouted, "Dalton!" and ran up to me. I hugged them tightly, feeling a wave of warmth in my chest. The kids proudly showed me their play area, excitedly telling me all about the fun they were having at the shelter. I was glad to see them so happy and to hear that they enjoyed playing with many other children. But I also noticed there were a lot of kids around, and the shelter was almost full. I had been there for nearly 2 hours when Darla was called to help prepare lunch for the other women. The shelter had 2 cooks, but the women living there also helped with cooking and cleaning. They were often happy to pitch in, as it helped pass the time and offered a welcome change from their past hardships. Darla and the kids asked me to stay for lunch. If it had just been her asking, I might have said no, but Natalie and Nathan were so eager to have me there that I couldn't say no. The kids sat next to me and chatted happily throughout the meal. Darla sat across from me, mostly quiet as she watched me enjoying time with the kids. She had a thoughtful look on her face, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I couldn't believe she looked so much better than the last time I saw her, but something still felt off. Visiting her in the shelter didn't seem like the best time for a deep talk, and I wasn't sure we had much to cover. Still, I had something important to tell her, so I decided to wait until it was time to leave. First, I had to pull myself away from Natalie and Nathan, who kept asking me to stay just a bit longer. Finally, I said my goodbyes to the kids as Darla took them back upstairs to the playroom. They were a little hesitant at first, but soon they got caught up in playing with friends and showing off the toys I had brought them. An American Girl doll for Natalie, and a little train set for Nathan. Darla walked me back to the secure front entrance. As I stepped outside, I realized I had felt their eyes on me the whole time. Every woman in the room had been watching me since I arrived. Some looked worried and unsure, while others seemed curious. "It felt a bit much in there sometimes," I said as Darla led me to the door. "Even though they've faced tough times, they still notice a kind person. They're women like anyone else, but they also see a caring man," Darla responded. "I guess I'm not used to that kind of attention." "Well, they know a lot about you, Dalton," she said. "All good things, I hope," I replied with a nervous chuckle. "Of course. What could I say that's bad? You're one of the few genuinely good people many of them have met. And I've talked you up ever since the kids and I moved in here," she added, looking down. I knew she was waiting for a reply, but I couldn't think of one. Then I remembered why I had come. "Oh, I almost forgot the reason I came here. Wasn't it to see me and the kids?" she giggled. "Yes, but the main reason I wanted to stop by is to tell you that Danny called me this morning." "Okay, what did he want?" "He told me that Randy got arrested last night up in Kalispell, Montana. Did you know he has a sister up there?" "Yes, his sister Rhonda lives there." Darla suddenly looked excited, and I could see how much brighter her mood became. Believe it or not, she was the one who called the police. She made a silent 911 call. She dialed but didn't say a word. Randy thought he was safe when he went to sleep, but then his sister was waiting for the officers at the front door and led them right into his room. "Oh my gosh, that's amazing! That is so typical of Rhonda to do something like that." Of Randy's family, Rhonda was probably the one I was closest to. I'm sure she wasn't too happy when she found out what he had done. "Yeah, probably not," I said, suddenly catching her eyes. I quickly looked away. "But anyway, I wanted to let you know they found him. He's in custody now." "Thank you so much, Dalton," she said, her eyes warm again. "And thank you for everything you've done for me and the kids. We couldn't have made it through without you." I laughed a little. "Come on, Darla, let's be honest. You wouldn't be in this situation if it weren't for me." "Dalton, stop. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. I'm a grown woman. I can take responsibility for my choices." I stood there quietly for a few moments. "Well, I should get going. Thanks for letting me see the kids. I had a great time." I gave Darla a quick hug, keeping it friendly. My hand stayed on her shoulders to make it easier to step back. Darla watched me leave, looking sad and disappointed. She knew the truth as well as I did. I was running away. One good thing about Randy's arrest was that Darla could ask the judge for a quick divorce since they had only postponed it when Randy tried to be a better husband and father. Now that he was facing several charges, including the one from the incident I was involved in, Randy was looking at serious legal trouble. As expected, he also lost his welding job with the oil company up north. The public defenders in Mason County weren't great at handling the charges, so Randy was likely going to spend a lot of time in Sioux Falls. Darla and the kids only stayed at the Cumberland house for about another month. Randy was being held without bail, which was unusual for cases that weren't serious crimes. But he had already shown he might run away and was considered a threat to Darla and the kids. Butch and Cecilia insisted that Darla and the kids move back in with them. Butch even built 2 bedrooms in the basement for the kids, along with a family room and play area, and remodeled Darla's old bedroom. It had been almost 2 months since I had seen Darla and the kids. On a Friday night, I was on ambulance duty for the high school football game in Royal Fork. It was early autumn, but warmer than usual for this time of year. I was working with Jake, Meg, Diana, and Misty that night. We brought lawn chairs and sat next to the ambulance, hoping none of the players would get hurt. The Royal Fork Raiders were down by a touchdown, but were close to scoring. Then, I noticed happy looks on Meg, Diana, and Misty's faces, but it wasn't because of the game. Jake Herman looked surprised, and I turned to see what had caught their attention. My heart raced when I saw Darla coming our way. She wore a casual denim dress and cowboy boots, giving her a fun, relaxed look. When Darla joined us, Meg, Diana, and Misty greeted her happily. Jake stayed quiet, looking lost in thought. "I could really use a drink," Diana said. "Me too," added Meg. "I'll join you," Misty said. Jake stayed still, deep in his own world. "Jake, let's go get a drink," Diana encouraged. "No, I'm good," Jake replied, distracted. "Jake, you're thirsty. Come on and get something to drink." Finally, Jake seemed to snap back to reality. He slowly walked toward the concession stand, glancing at Darla as he went. I turned my attention back to the game as Darla took a seat next to me. "Well, you and the girls sure know how to grab attention," I said. "I had to get your attention somehow, Dalton." I sighed. "What's the point?" "You know exactly what the point is, Dalton. How long are we going to keep avoiding each other? When will we finally talk things through?" "I'm not avoiding anyone, Darla. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing else to say. We tried something, it didn't work. You went back to Randy, that didn't work. Now we're both single and free to do what we want." "Really, that's it? It's that easy?" "Well, it felt easy enough the day you left. I wanted to talk that day, but you didn't stay. And I wanted you to talk to me the night before, but you were with someone else." I scoffed lightly. "Don't brush me off, Dalton. We keep making the same mistakes and then blame each other. It's time to stop that. We need to start fresh." I chuckled softly. "You really think we can act like everything that happened didn't? Just start over? You can't really believe that." "I'm not being naive, Dalton. I don't plan to forget everything from the past months. The only way to move on is to sit down and do what we never did from the beginning. Talk." I shook my head. "There's nothing to discuss." "That's not true. You want to know what I think? I think you still care about me, Dalton, and that frightens you. It frightens me too because I still care about you, but I'm ready to face it. I'm not scared, Darla. I face tough situations every day that most people avoid. Then prove it. How? And why should I?" "By having the courage to sit down with me and really talk it out." At that moment, the crowd erupted as Royal Fork scored, bringing the game closer. We paused our conversation until they were ready to kick off again. At that moment, Darla got up. "Do you work tomorrow, Dalton?" "No," I replied, feeling a bit annoyed. "I start my shift again on Sunday." "I'll be at your house tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp, Dalton. I expect you to be there, awake, dressed, and ready to talk. Maybe think about having some coffee ready." Darla turned and walked back toward the main seating area where her parents and friends were likely sitting. Her dad, Butch, is a huge football fan. As she walked away, I noticed how lovely she looked in her dress. I felt a mix of emotions that caught me by surprise. "Miss us?" Diana asked with a teasing tone as the group returned to the ambulance. "Like a bad headache," I replied sharply. "You all really know how to add pressure, don't you? Only when it's necessary." "Well, you can ease up. It won't help much anyway." "You can be really stubborn sometimes, Dalton. What's the harm in just talking to her? What good will it do?" "Maybe for you," she replied. "I'm not saying it will be easy, but you could start fresh or at least end things without hard feelings." "I don't have hard feelings toward her." "Well, your actions say otherwise." I thought I did okay during the ambulance ride. It's more than just small gestures, Dalton. Yeah, I wish there was an easy way to deal with what I'm feeling. I got up and went to the concession stand, leaving Diana to think about what I said. I hardly slept that night, knowing that Darla and I would have an important conversation soon. By 6 o'clock, I was wide awake and anxious. I had seen her in a tough spot, but I had never felt this uneasy around her before. She arrived right on time at 7:50 and let herself in. "Most people knock," I said, a bit annoyed by her casualness. "Yeah, well, I'm not most people." "I'll give you that," I said, handing her a cup of coffee. "Cheers," I added lightly. Darla sat down at the table, holding the mug. I could see she was just as tense as I was. We both understood that what we said in the next few moments could change our relationship. I worried it might mean we wouldn't even be friends anymore. "Well," I began, "you wanted to talk. Go ahead." She took a moment to gather her thoughts, her voice soft and uncertain. She had been quite strong toward the end of our relationship, especially before she went back to Randy, who had not treated her well. "Dalton, what I mean is—" "Take your time, Darla. We have all day." Tears began to form in her eyes, though she was trying to hold them back. I rolled my eyes, thinking this was just another way to play with my feelings. But as she spoke on, it became clear she was being honest. "Dalton, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for everything. This all happened because of me, and I'm not just saying that to make you feel sorry for me. Everything that occurred after I left your house happened because I let it. I let Randy change my mind. I went back to something familiar, even though my future with you was much brighter." "That doesn't make much sense, Darla," I said, feeling lost. She took a deep breath. "All my life, Dalton, I've had attention from boys. It started when I was around 8 or 9, when an older boy in our area began to watch me closely. One late night, my father saw him peeking into my window. My dad never explained what that boy was doing outside, but I have a good idea. He was really angry and took the boy home, making sure his parents understood not to let him near me again. When I was 12, I started to grow up. By the time I was 13, everything changed quickly. At 15, I got a lot of attention from boys, but not all of it was welcome. Other girls were jealous of the attention I got, which made things tougher in our small town. The boys seemed more interested in my looks than in who I really was. Whenever I went out with a boy and we were away from adults, I felt uneasy about the attention. It made me resentful, of everyone, boys, girls, adults. It didn't matter. There were times I wished I could feel calm and not sad anymore. Then Randy came into my life in high school. He said all the right things and seemed to care about me. I didn't realize back then that he was controlling me. He took his time gaining my trust. But in the end, all he wanted was to have me for himself, which wasn't real love. He made many promises but broke them all. He convinced me that others only liked me for shallow reasons, claiming he was the only one who truly cared for me. By the time I figured out the truth, I was already married with 2 kids, and my future looked dark. Randy always promised things would get better, but as he lost more jobs, he started to drink more. Soon the hurtful words began, followed by yelling and blaming me and the kids for his problems. He would disappear for days, spending time with friends and come back upset. I often found myself hiding the kids to keep them safe from things that were hard to explain. I sat down at the table across from her. "I know your past with Randy, Darla. You've told me how he treated you. But how does that connect to us?" "It matters, Dalton, because I have a long history of making poor choices. It became the only type of love I knew. No matter how much he drank, there were moments when he would get clear-headed and tell me he loved me. Things would seem okay until the next disappointment came along. So why stay with him? I never felt strong enough to leave. I didn't understand why women don't just walk away from bad relationships. When you're in one, you focus on the good times. Not just for yourself, but for your kids, too. You tell yourself that the bad stuff doesn't happen to you. But when it does, it can be hard to see. So, what do you hope for in the future? I want to make better choices for my life. I want to finally move on from Randy. My lawyer is already working on ending my marriage, and with Randy in jail, I don't have to worry about him right now. That sounds like a good plan. What's next? Next, Dalton, I want you to be part of my life. I would love for us to be together, but if that's not possible, I'd be happy just to be your friend, even if it means seeing you with someone else from a distance. But Darla, you had me in your life before, and you still went back to Randy, so I have two questions. First, how can I trust that you won't make the same mistakes again? And second, why do you want me? Now that you're single, you could probably find attention from any guy in our area. First of all, Dalton, Randy is in the past. He won't bother me or my kids anymore. Even if he gets out of prison and somehow tries to visit the kids, he will never hurt us again. Plus, my father gave me something for protection when we came back home from the Cumberland house. She took something small out of her purse. Whoa, okay, put it away. What's wrong, Dalton? Afraid of something to keep me safe? She laughed. If Randy ever comes near me again, he'll think twice. I'm not aiming to hurt him badly, but I will defend myself. Yeah, okay. Can you just put it away now? Sure, she said, putting it back. But I definitely want to go to the range together sometime. Dad took me there a few weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. So, I said, changing the subject, why do you think we'll date? Can I really compare to Randy? Why would you even think that? Because he said something that night at the restaurant. Darla burst into laughter, and it took her a little while to calm down. Oh my God, that is the funniest thing I've heard. I can't believe you're all worried about that. What's funny is that you're almost 6 inches taller than him. What does that have to do with anything? Honestly, Dalton, she said, trying to gather herself, I only bring this up because I care about you. Randy doesn't compare to you at all. Trust me when I say that you have so much more to offer. Whatever he said was just to upset you. You've made a bigger impression on me than he ever did. I wasn't sure how to react to her compliment, so I just said, yeah, well, it still bothered me. Come on, Dalton, she said more seriously. Please give me another chance. We'll take it slow, I promise. I'll work hard to earn your trust back. I want you. I truly believe I deserve you. For too long, I accepted what others thought I should have. People like you, Dalton, seemed out of my reach. Oh, that's not true, I scoffed. You're just another reason why nice people seem to finish last. Yes, it is true. You're the kind of person most girls want. Some of us went for the popular ones because we never thought we could connect with someone like you. I was always too scared. I thought all the guys were the same, and since I didn't meet anyone good, I didn't get to know people like you. I thought you wouldn't notice someone like me. Others often looked down on me. I never thought I had a chance with you. And when we were together before, I was always worried it would end. What did I ever do to make you think that? Don't you see how unfair that is to me? You just assumed the worst about me. I know. I didn't say it was fair, Dalton. I just said that's how I felt at the time. To be honest, I don't really know myself that well. I can't even tell you what movies I like, what music I enjoy, or what food I prefer. When I get anxious, I stick to what I know. That's how I ended up back with Randy. Okay, I said, surprised. How can you not know these things after all this time? When we went to the movies, we always watched what Randy wanted. When we listened to the radio, it was his choice. And when we went out to eat, it was wherever he wanted. The truth is, Dalton, I don't think I even like your spaghetti that much. I just made it because the kids enjoyed it and I didn't want to upset you. That hit me hard. Really? You don't like my spaghetti? Not really, she said, tearing up a bit. I'm truly sorry, Dalton. Suddenly it all made sense. Here was a woman who had spent years trying to make everyone else happy, leaving herself behind. Her sense of worth depended entirely on what others thought. If Randy and the kids were happy, she felt happy too. If everyone around her was happy, then she felt happy too. When Randy praised her, she felt good about herself. When he criticized her, she believed him. Darla Jones was like a blank canvas, and for the first time in her life, she could choose what her life would look like. Someone once told me long ago that a ship can't sail if it's stuck with an anchor. So, she needed to let go of that anchor, not because it was important, but because she was. It was time for Darla to steer her own ship. And now she could because Randy was finally out of her life. She had tasted freedom before, but now she truly understood that Randy offered nothing good for her or the children. Maybe I was being foolish or too soft-hearted. I didn't really know. All I knew as I looked into Darla's eyes across my kitchen table was that I cared for her deeply. Do you like Chinese food? I asked. Chinese? I can't even pick between hamburgers and hot dogs, she replied, wiping her tears away. Well, we should decide soon because I really love Chinese food. Where are Natalie and Nathan? They're at Mom and Dad's. Why do you ask? Let's go get them. Where are we going? She asked as I put on my jacket. We're going on an adventure. What kind of adventure? An adventure to find the real Darla Jones. We got into my car and drove to Butch and Cecilia's to pick up the kids. While we were there, I asked Darla to pack an overnight bag for herself and for the kids. I had my work bag in the car, so I already had some extra clothes. I also made sure we packed swimsuits. Natalie and Nathan were thrilled about the surprise mini-vacation. We drove east, taking the highway into the Twin Cities. I kept our destination secret and had arranged to swap shifts with my co-worker, Neil Boyd, so I could take the next day off. I would work later for him in exchange. We arrived in Minneapolis just before noon and headed south to Bloomington, a big suburb of the Twin Cities. Our destination was the Mall of America. Darla and the kids had never been there, but I had visited many times. Like many people, I still called the amusement park Camp Snoopy instead of Nickelodeon Universe. Natalie and Nathan were bouncing with excitement, eager to ride all the rides, but I told them we needed to eat first. We went to the top level of the mall and found a new restaurant, the Imperial Szechuan Palace, a fancy Chinese restaurant. The delicious smell hit me as soon as we walked in. The restaurant had sit-down dining where we could choose what we wanted from the menu. During lunchtime, the buffet was really impressive. "Oh, wow," Darla said. "I don't even know what to pick. Some of it looks tasty, but some doesn't look so great," she added. "Why not grab a plate and try a little bit of everything? Maybe you'll find something you like," I suggested. "Okay," she replied, and I smiled as I watched her check out all the choices. There were nearly 50 different dishes. Eventually, she chose a few things, and we all sat down together. Natalie and Nathan were excited about the chicken skewers and really enjoyed the crab rangoon, which everyone agreed was amazing. Darla ended up trying about 15 different dishes, but it was clear that this style of food wasn't her favorite. "I'm sorry, Dalton. I just don't think I like it. Everything is either too spicy or too salty. I see you enjoy this food, but it's just not for me," she said. "That's okay," I replied. "No problem at all." "You're not upset?" I shook my head. "Why would I be? At least now you know for sure. It's totally fine if we don't all like the same things." Darla stretched across the table and held my hand. It felt nice to look into her eyes again, but I knew we should take things slow. After lunch, we went back out to the main area. Knowing Darla didn't really enjoy the Chinese food, I suggested we stop by the A&W stand for some root beer floats, which the kids loved. Darla even ordered some onion rings. "Now these I know I like," she laughed. It was wonderful to see her happy. Step by step, I was feeling that special warmth from being with Darla, Natalie, and Nathan. It felt almost like a family, but I didn't want to rush anything. We spent the afternoon enjoying rides at the amusement park set up in the mall. The kids were amazed that such a fun place was here. Natalie was tall enough to go on almost every ride, except for a couple of them. Nathan was a bit disappointed he couldn't try some of the bigger rides, but I managed to sneak him onto Paul Bunyan's log ride while everyone was distracted by the long line. By 6 o'clock, I said it was time to head home, which made the kids groan in disappointment. Darla reminded them how lucky they were to be there on a weekend. I also told them I had a big surprise planned, so we drove a few blocks north to check into a large suite at the Radisson Hotel, which has the Water Park of America, one of the biggest indoor water parks in the Midwest. Once we settled into our suite, we found a king-size bed and a sofa bed in the main room, plus a separate bedroom for the kids with a set of bunk beds. We had a great time swimming until 10 o'clock, which worried Darla because the kids were usually in bed by 9. By the end of the day, both kids were very tired and fell asleep right away. Darla didn't agree when I suggested she take the bed while I used the sofa. "Dalton, that doesn't make sense. There's enough room for both of us." "Look," I said with a sigh, "if we want to try again, we need to take it slow. I don't want to rush things." "Well, can I at least have a goodnight hug?" she asked. "I can do that." We hugged lightly, though she seemed to hope for something warmer. I held her for a moment, enjoying being close. A few times that night, I woke up and noticed that it woke Darla, too. We exchanged soft looks, and she signaled for me to come closer. I smiled and teasingly said she was trying to tempt me. "Can't blame a girl for trying," she joked. The next morning, we all slept in, and I had arranged for a late checkout. We spent the late morning and afternoon at the Minneapolis Children's Museum. I had thought about going to a trampoline park, but decided to save our energy for the drive home. Instead, we had a wonderful time with Natalie and Nathan, enjoying all the fun activities at the museum. When we got back to Royal Fork that night, it was nearly 9. Both kids were fast asleep, and we had to carry them into Butch and Cecilia's house. I felt a little sad knowing Darla had to work at Callahan's the next morning. As I got ready to leave, she walked to my car to say goodbye. I had just turned to wish her good night when she hugged me warmly. It was hard to not hug her back. When we finally stepped back, she said, "Keep going, Dalton. I'll be waiting for you at the finish line." "What?" I asked, confused. "You said that nice guys never finish first." "I just want you to know I'll be here for you, Dalton. No matter how long it takes, I won't give up on you. You deserve to be happy, and so do I. You made me so happy this weekend, and I want more." Then she smiled and jogged back into her parents' house, closing the door behind her. I took a deep breath and drove home. We kept things friendly as we could, with many sweet moments together. This continued through Halloween, and by the time Thanksgiving came, Darla and the kids were living in my house. The warmth between us grew stronger, and our connection deepened more than I had ever felt before. What I thought was a happy relationship when we first lived together was nothing compared to what we have now. Darla was always on my mind, not in a clingy way, but because it felt like we were really becoming one. Maybe it was fate that made us go through tough times to get to this point. I'm not sure. Sometimes we only see how good things are after facing hard times, like enjoying sunny days more after a week of rain. "I'd do anything to erase those months we were apart," Darla said one evening during a cozy candlelight dinner. "Are you sure?" I asked, taking a bite of my steak, which we both loved. "Yes. Are you saying you wouldn't?" "No, I'm not saying that. I just think maybe we had to go through it to really appreciate what we have now, like a test or something." "Well, I hope it never happens again. I lost you once, Dalton. I hope I never lose you again." "You won't, sweetie. I love you, Darla." "Sometimes I need to hear that more, Dalton. Even now, it's hard for me to really believe it. If I asked you to name 10 things you love about me, would you struggle to think of them all? Is that a challenge?" "Well, no. I guess I was just saying." I stood up from my chair and knelt next to her, holding her hands. "Darla, I love you. I think I've loved you since we first met. There are things about you that you don't even see as lovable. I love that you are a great mother. I love watching you read stories to the kids and tucking them in at night. You've been their support during hard times. I love your smile, even if you think your teeth aren't perfect. I admire you, even if you think some features aren't right. And I really love how messy you get when painting your toenails, getting as much polish on the floor as on your nails." Darla laughed softly, wiping away a tear. "I love lying next to you in bed, feeling our warmth together. I even love that you snore just a little, even when you say you don't. I admire how hard you work at Callahan's because it's your first real job, and you show everyone you can keep up with them. I love the way you smell when you come home from work, even when you've been busy. Yikes! I always feel so tired and messy when I get home from Callahan's. I don't mind. There are very few times when I feel more connected to you. There's something special about that moment that makes everything feel stronger." "You're a little different," she said, giving me a playful nudge. "I appreciate that you think I'm different and are brave enough to say it. I love how you look in my t-shirt when you come to bed. I prefer that over anything else. Most of all, I cherish that you chose me. I just hope I can show you that you made the right choice." "Oh, Dalton," she said, hugging me tightly, "you make me so happy. I want to marry you, Darla. I want you to be my wife and share our lives. I want our families to come together. I want to live with you, laugh with you, and even work through our disagreements because I know we can handle them and grow closer. Will you have me? Will you make one more great choice and take me as your husband?" "Yes! Oh, yes! I love you so much!" "I love you too. Soon to be Mrs. Darla Anderson." Asterisk, asterisk. Epilogue. Asterisk, asterisk. That night, I didn't give Darla a ring. I wanted to let her take the lead in choosing her own path. Instead, I shared a budget I felt good about, around $4,000, which surprised her and me as well. This way, we could plan a nice but simple wedding for the next summer. I wanted Darla to pick a ring that suited her style and one that she would feel happy wearing for years. We decided on a fire-themed wedding. I wore my dress uniform since Danny Larson was my best man, and the groomsmen were all colleagues from the fire department. They looked really sharp in their uniforms. Natalie and Nathan took part as a junior bridesmaid and ring-bearer. At the end of the ceremony, we left the Methodist church where I grew up and rode away on a beautifully restored fire engine owned by our firefighters' union. This historic engine, which used to serve the Red River Falls Fire Department in the late 1920s and 30s, had been lovingly cared for by our members. Darla looked amazing in a simple silver dress that reached her knees. She radiated confidence and grace, making a lasting impression on everyone. Darla's bridal party included her close friends Diana, Meg, and Misty. Diana had been a great support during a tough time last year, helping us reconnect as friends after we faced some challenges. I had not always treated her the best, especially considering how much she had helped Darla and me during that difficult time. I realized just how much she had always supported me. I helped Darla get comfortable in her seat on the old fire engine, making sure she was steady. Natalie and Nathan stood behind the seat, holding onto the rails to keep their balance. The engine was moving slowly, and I turned around to wave at all the guests who were still blowing bubbles and tossing birdseed at us. I saw Diana standing there with her small bouquet, so I went over to give her a warm hug. "I really appreciate you. You know that, right?" I said softly as I hugged her. "I know," she replied, feeling emotional. "I wouldn't be here today without you." "That's true," she said with a smile, holding me tighter. "Thank you for everything," I said as I stepped back from the hug. "You're welcome. Now go enjoy your time with Darla and the kids on the fire truck." My wife and kids! Those words filled me with joy. I took Darla's hand as I drove the old engine into the street, joining our little parade of fire trucks. 2 other fire trucks from different departments joined us, all driven by members of the wedding party. We traveled through the city, honking our horns and sometimes using the sirens, with help from the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Pat Quinn drove his SUV with lights on to help our group pass through some intersections. I imagined the local police weren't thrilled, but it didn't matter to us. This was our day, and we wanted it to be special. Some people in the community might have had their doubts, but Chief Van Dyke had given us the go-ahead as long as we covered the fuel costs, which was simple for a short cruise. As we drove down the main street through Red River Falls, I felt as happy as I had ever been. "You know what the best part of this is, Dalton?" my lovely bride asked. "What's that, my love?" "We proved that the saying about nice guys is wrong." "What saying is that?" She squeezed my hand and said, "That nice guys finish last. They don't. And the best part is that nice girls can finish first, too. You did it! You kept your promise. Even when I said it wasn't a race, you waited for me at the finish line just like you promised. It's funny in a way. You help people for a job, and you made a big difference in my life. I would do anything for you and the kids. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you." "And I would do the same for you," she said warmly. "I love you, Dalton." "I love you too, Mrs. Anderson." Just like the silver bell on the old fire truck, her new name sounded perfect. Hey, listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.